By the time Grace Turner reached the little wooden bridge over Willow Creek, she could not feel her fingers. The wind coming off the frozen lake cut straight through her thrift store dress. It slipped under the thin cardigan down her spine, into the soft place between her ribs where fear had lived for so many years. It felt like a second heart. Snow dusted the planks at her feet. Her bare hands rested on the rail skin, sticking for a second to the frost. She watched the dark water move under the ice, just visible in a narrow black vein. The sound of it was soft and steady, a quiet rushing under all that white. Still moving, she thought, even when you cannot see it. Her breath came in short, white bursts. She focused on that instead of the ache in her body, instead of the throb in her ribs when she inhaled too deep. In, out. In, out. The cold air burned her throat. A car rolled past on the road behind her. Headlights swept over her shoulders, then disappeared around the bend toward town. No one slowed down. No one looked twice. Of course they did not. People did not stop for strange women alone on bridges after 10 at night in a place like Willow Harbor, Minnesota. The town sign had promised friendly people safe streets. She had believed that for about an hour until someone slipped a hand into her bag at the bus station and walked away with everything she owned. Now she had nothing. No bag, no money, no ID, just the dress on her back. The cardigan and the small silver spoon on a chain at her neck, warmed by her skin. Her mother had used that spoon in the bakery where she worked. Grace touched it with numb fingers, like it was the last thin thread tying her to a life that had not hurt. A gust of wind shoved at her. She blinked hard and stepped away from the railing. She was not going into the water. That would be giving him what he wanted. Daniel would have been happy to see her sink. She turned and started toward the glow ahead. Maple Street was almost empty. Christmas lights wrapped around a few porch rails, even though December had barely started. The snow on the sidewalks was stamped with boot prints and dog tracks. Far off over the rooftops, the frozen skin of Willow Lake caught the streetlight and shone flat and hard. She walked until her legs shook, then stopped at the bus shelter near the edge of town. A cracked plastic bench, a metal pole with a schedule on it. The last bus time had a thin line through it, 9:10 p.m. She laughed once, a short sound that did not feel like it belonged to her, and sat. She did not know how long she stayed there. Long enough for her toes to go from burning to nothing. Long enough for her jaw to ache from clenching it. Cars went by every few minutes, a streak of light and warmth she did not belong to. She folded her arms tight across her chest and stared at the puddle of orange light under the street lamp. If she focused on that, she did not have to think about the house she had left behind, the hospital room, the way Daniel's voice sounded when he called her a liar. Headlights washed over her again, brighter this time. They slowed. Tires hissed on the wet street. Grace's muscles tensed. She straightened, ready to run, even though she knew she could not outrun anyone in this cold. The white minivan pulled to the curb, engine idling. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, pulling his collar up against the wind. He was tall, but not the kind of tall that crowds a room. Brown hair cut short, shoulders hunched in a dark coat. His tie was loosened and crooked like he had pulled it off half an hour ago and given up halfway. He looked tired in a way she recognized, like the bones beneath his skin were worn down. He lifted his empty hands where she could see them. "You waiting on somebody?" he asked. His voice was low, careful, the way you would talk to a skittish dog. "Last bus came and went a while ago." "I'm fine," she said. Her voice scraped on the way out, rusty from disuse. It sounded like a lie, but she had been saying those two words for 12 years. They came easy. His gaze flicked over her, taking in the bare legs, the dress, the lack of coat, the way she shivered. He looked away, jaw working. "Look, I am not trying to bother you. It is just below freezing. There is a diner on Main that is still open. You want a coffee?" He nodded toward the corner. "Place is bright, lots of people. You can sit where everyone can see you, no strings." She shook her head. "I do not have any money. Good thing I did not ask for any." He gave a quick, crooked smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Let me buy you something hot. You can say no, and I will walk away. But I would like to sleep tonight." A gust blew up Maple, catching the hem of her dress. She hugged herself tighter. The bench under her felt like ice. Her stomach cramped, reminding her she had not eaten since sometime that morning on the bus. A vending machine sandwich half stale. She glanced toward the road. No other cars slowed down. The world went on warm and closed. "Just coffee," she said again, softer. His shoulders dropped a little, like he had been holding his breath. "Just coffee," he agreed. "I am Miles Carter." She did not answer until they were inside the diner, and the warmth hit her face. City Diner was nearly empty. A couple in thick coats sat in the corner arguing in murmurs over a phone screen. A trucker hunched at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug. The place smelled like burnt toast grease and coffee that had been sitting on a warmer since dinner. They slid into a booth near the window. The vinyl seat clung to her damp tights. The overhead light buzzed and flickered once, then steadied. A waitress in a paper hat and lipstick too bright for her tired eyes came over. "What can I get you, hon?" "Burger and coffee," Miles said. "And for her," he looked at Grace, letting her decide. "Soup, if you have any." Her stomach knotted again at the thought of anything solid. "Chicken noodle or tomato?" "Chicken," Grace said. The waitress scribbled, collected the menus, and wandered off. For a moment, there was only the hum of the refrigerator case and the soft clink of cutlery from the corner booth. Miles wrapped his hands around his empty mug like it was already hot. "So," he said, "you got a name?" She hesitated. Saying the old one felt dangerous, like speaking a spell that could summon him right into this dingy diner. "Grace," she said finally. "Grace Turner." "Grace," he repeated as if trying it on. "You from Willow Harbor. Grace Turner." She gave a small shake of her head. "Just got here." "Got people in town?" "No." The answers were short, but it was all she could manage without the tears pressing into her throat. The waitress set down 2 steaming mugs. Grace cupped hers, letting the heat soak into her fingers. The first sip scalded her tongue, bitter and cheap, but it slid into the hollow ache in her chest and sat there. Miles watched her for a second, then glanced away. When he spoke again, his tone had changed a little flatter, like he was reading facts off a page. "I have got 5 kids at home," he said. 7 years old, all of them, quintuplets. Grace blinked. "5? Yeah." The corner of his mouth twitched. "It is as chaotic as it sounds. I am late picking them up, again. Our neighbor is with them, but she is 70, and I am wearing her out." He paused. "I am not saying that so you will feel sorry for me. I am saying my life is a mess, so I get the whole, this is not how I thought things would go thing." Her fingers tightened around the mug. There was a time she had thought she knew exactly how her life would go. Wedding, house, babies, a kitchen that smelled like sugar and cinnamon, not hiding on a bus bench in a town she had never heard of, with bruises on her wrists and her name buried in a hospital file marked deceased. "You have somewhere to stay tonight?" he asked. She stared at the swirling surface of the coffee. The reflection of the overhead light broke on a tiny ripple. Silence was its own answer. He let out a breath that clouded in the cold air near the window. "All right," he said. "I have a house a few blocks from here, small, messy, 1 extra room that used to be an office. You can have it a night or 2. Lock on the inside, I promise." Her head snapped up. Fear flared in her chest. "You do not even know me." "No," he said. "I do not. But I know the look on your face. I have seen it in the mirror more times than I like to admit." He met her eyes. They were brown-ringed with tired lines, but steady. "I am not asking you for anything," he said. "You can leave as soon as you want. In the morning next week, whatever. Right now you look cold and hungry and alone. I have an extra blanket, that is all." That, she thought of the bridge, the black water under the ice, the way her fingers had stuck to the frozen rail. She thought of Daniel's hand around her throat. Her own hand went to the spoon at her neck. The metal was warm. "Just a night," she whispered. He nodded. "Just a night." Outside, the wind rattled the diner windows. Inside, the coffee cooled in their cups. Later, when they stepped back into the cold and crossed the empty street, his minivan sat under a streetlight, paint dulled by salt and age. She stopped with the passenger door half open, waiting for the panic she always felt around cars now. It came sharp and fast, a film of another night, another man, a different vehicle. Miles noticed the way her hand froze on the handle. "You can sit in the back if you want," he said quietly, "or keep the door cracked. I will drive slow." She swallowed and slid into the seat, leaving the belt unbuckled. He did not comment. The engine turned over with a cough. They drove in silence past dark houses and bare trees. Her breath fogged the window beside her. She drew a small line in it with one finger and watched it fade. At the end of a cul-de-sac, he turned into a driveway. A basketball hoop leaned at an angle over the garage. 2 bikes lay on their sides in the yard, half buried in snow. Plastic toys were scattered like someone had dropped a box of color across the lawn. Over the front door, a single porch light burned a pool of yellow in the dark. Miles cut the engine and sat for a second looking up at it. "That is us," he said. "Home." Grace followed his gaze. The light was simple and small, but her chest tightened when she saw it. It had been a long time since any light had been left on for her. She stepped out into the cold and pulled his coat tighter around herself, heading toward the glow. The porch steps creaked under their weight. Miles brushed snow off the mat with his shoe and pushed the front door open. Warm air rolled out, smelling faintly of laundry detergent, crayons, and something overcooked. "Sorry about the mess," he said over his shoulder. "I keep thinking I will catch up on the weekends, but the weekends have other plans." Grace followed him inside and stopped just past the threshold. The entryway was a small square of worn hardwood. Coats hung crooked on hooks. Little boots and sneakers were piled in a loose heap that had once been a row. A pink backpack lay open, math worksheets spilling out. Marker scribbles climbed up the wall near a light switch. It did not look neglected, it looked used, lived in. From the living room, a soft snore drifted in. Miles winced. "That will be Mrs. Alvarez," he said, lowering his voice. "Our neighbor. She watches the kids when I am late." They stepped around a plastic fire truck and into the living room. An older woman lay on the sagging couch, a knitted blanket tucked up under her chin. Gray streaks threaded through her dark hair. Her glasses had slid down to the tip of her nose. The television was on some game show, the sound low, the blue light washing over the stacks of board games along the far wall. Miles crossed to her and touched her shoulder. "Mrs. A," he said gently, "you can go home. I am here." She stirred, blinked, then sat up with a groan. "About time, mijo," she muttered, though her eyes were kind. She glanced past him and saw Grace, her gaze sharp and quick and assessing, but not unkind. "This is Grace," Miles said. "She is going to use the guest room for a bit." Mrs. Alvarez took in the borrowed coat, the bare legs the way Grace hovered near the doorway like she was ready to bolt. "You eat?" she asked. Grace nodded once. "Good." The older woman stood, joints popping. "Kids are down. They were wild tonight. Full moon or too much sugar, I do not know." She reached for her purse on the coffee table. Miles caught her hand and folded a few bills into it. "Take it," he said when she started to protest. "Please." She huffed, but did not give the money back. At the door, she paused beside Grace. "You are safe here," she said quietly, so only Grace could hear. "He is a good one. Stressed, but good." Then she slipped out into the night, the cold air rushing in for a moment before the door closed again. The house settled into a deeper silence. Miles rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger. "Let me show you the room." She followed him up a narrow staircase, hand grazing the banister. Family photos climbed the wall. She tried not to look, but her gaze snagged on a picture near her shoulder. A woman with a round face and bright eyes smiled at the camera. Her short hair was covered with a knitted cap. She sat on a hospital bed holding 5 newborns wrapped in different colored blankets. Someone had written their names in marker on the photo border. Liam, Hazel, Owen, Mason, Lily. Miles noticed where she was looking. "That is Emily," he said. His voice went softer around the name. "My wife." Grace did not ask the question that rose to her tongue. How long? How? The answers lived in the tired slope of his shoulders. At the top of the stairs, he turned left into a small room. "This was my office," he said. Then the twins started crawling, and everything that was not nailed down became a hazard. "You can move whatever you want." There was a narrow bed against one wall, made up with an old but clean quilt. A small dresser stood under a window that looked out over the backyard. Moonlight silvered a swing set and a plastic slide. A desk in the corner held a lamp and a mug full of pens, most of them without caps. Miles stepped inside and pointed to the door. "Lock is here. Here." He tapped the metal knob. It had a simple turn lock. He twisted it, then unlocked it again, showing her. "Nobody comes in without knocking anyway," he said. "But if it helps to know you can lock it, you should know." "Thank you," Grace said. The words felt thin compared to what he was offering, but they were all she had. "There are extra blankets in the closet," he went on. "Bathroom is at the end of the hall. Towels in the cabinet. Help yourself." She stood in the middle of the room, arms still around herself as he backed toward the door. "If you need anything, I am down the hall," he said. "Last door on the right." She nodded. He hesitated, then gave a small, almost shy smile. "Good night, Grace." "Good night," she answered. When the door closed, she stood very still, listening. His footsteps retreated floorboards, creaking. A door clicked shut. Somewhere a radiator hissed to life. The house exhaled. She tried the lock. It turned with a soft snick. The sound loosened something inside her that had been yanked tight all day. In the bathroom, the light was harsh. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and almost looked away, but forced her eyes to hold. Her hair was tangled. Her eyes were ringed in shadow. A yellowing bruise bloomed along her jaw. Another peeked above the neckline of the cardigan. Finger marks cupped one wrist. She closed her fingers over them, then dropped her hand. The shower water took a long time to run warm. When it finally did, She stood under it until the small room fogged over and the mirror vanished. Hot water stung the cuts on her knuckles. She let it. Later in the narrow bed with the quilt pulled to her chin, she lay on her side and watched the rectangle of window. Tree branches etched black lines against a clouded sky. Her body ached, but the mattress was soft, and for the first time in a long time, every sound she heard had an explanation. Pipes ticking, whined against the glass, a distant dog barking. Her hand drifted to the spoon at her throat. She wrapped her fingers around it and closed her eyes. Sleep came in pieces. When the noise started, she thought at first she was back in the old house. The heavy steps, the door slamming, the sudden shout. Her eyes flew open. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then a high, giggling squeal cut through the fog, followed by a sharp whisper. "Quiet, you are going to wake Dad." It was not Daniel's voice. It was smaller, younger. Grace sat up. Pale light seeped around the edges of the curtains. She glanced at the digital clock on the dresser. 6:03 a.m. Someone thundered down the hall outside her door. A second set of feet chased after. A third collided with the first. "Al Mason, move. You ran into me, Liam." "Do not step on my dragon," another voice complained. A chorus of voices rose and fell, overlapping, punctuated by the clink of dishes and the screech of a chair dragging across the kitchen floor below. Grace swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her muscles protested. The borrowed sleep shirt that Miles had found in a drawer was too big, hanging off one shoulder. She dressed quickly in her own clothes again, shivering as the cold air met her damp hair. She hesitated with her hand on the doorknob. The lock sat under her palm. She could stay inside, wait until the house emptied itself out, then slip away like a ghost. Or she could open the door and step into the noise. Her chest tightened. She turned the knob. The hallway smelled like coffee and maple syrup. Voices bounced off the walls. She followed the sound down the stairs and stopped at the edge of the kitchen. Chaos had a shape, and it looked like this room. The table was covered in cereal boxes, open and spilling. Milk pooled under a tipped bowl. One chair lay on its side. A toaster smoked quietly on the counter, a slice of bread inside turned completely black. 5 children moved through the mess with the easy confidence of creatures who had never known a quiet morning. A boy with dark hair that insisted on sticking up more on one side than the other stood with his arms crossed, watching the others with narrowed eyes. Liam, she guessed. A girl with long brown hair curls frizzed out in a halo fought with a brush in one hand and a spoon in the other. Hazel. Another boy smaller sat at the table drawing shapes and spilled sugar with one finger. That had to be Owen, quiet and self-contained. Near the fridge, a boy in dinosaur pajamas tried to pour orange juice into a cup and missed by a wide margin. "Mason," Miles said, lunging for the carton. "Tilt the cup, not the jug, remember?" At his feet, a little girl in a too big t-shirt that read Big Sister, even though she was not, clutched a stuffed rabbit and watched everything with wide eyes. Lily. Miles wore yesterday's shirt, now wrinkled sleeves rolled up. His hair stuck up on one side. Coffee stained the front of his undershirt. He turned off the smoking toaster and waved a dish towel under the smoke detector with the weary focus of someone who had done this before. He looked up and saw Grace in the doorway. Relief flickered across his face, quick and sincere. "Morning," he said over the noise. "Sorry, this is not our best version of breakfast." All 5 pairs of eyes swung toward her. The room went very quiet. Grace froze like a deer in headlights. She could feel milk under her shoe tacky on the floor. The air smelled of burnt bread and sugar. "Who is that?" the tallest boy asked. He planted his feet, shoulders tipped forward, not afraid so much as guarding a border. "This is Grace," Miles said. He set the juice down carefully and stepped closer to the table. "She is going to be staying with us for a little while." "Like a babysitter?" Hazel asked. There was an edge in her voice, sharp as a tiny blade. "No," Grace said before she could stop herself. 5 gazes flicked back to her. She swallowed. "I am just someone your dad helped. I did not have anywhere to go." "People always say that," Mason muttered. "Then they go." "Mason," Miles said quietly. "It is okay," Grace said. She met the boy's eyes, then Liam's. "I cannot promise anything, but I am not here to replace anyone. I am just Grace." At the word replace, Hazel's jaw tightened, her fingers twisted in her hair. Lily took a small step around the table, half behind her father. "Are you sad?" she asked. The question landed with a lightness that did not match its weight. Grace could have lied. The truth came out instead, small and plain. "Yes," she said. "I am, but I am safe here, and that helps." Liam studied her a moment longer, then dropped his gaze to the mess on the table. "We are going to miss the bus," Owen said quietly, the first words he had offered. Miles jolted. Right, shoes everyone, backpacks. Hazel, I will fix your hair in the car. Hazel made a face but set the brush down. Chairs scraped. The room exploded back into movement. Grace stepped aside as they rushed past her, a blur of zippers and laces and winter coats. Lily paused at her hip, looking up. Your shirt is on backwards, Lily whispered. Grace glanced down and saw that it was. A surprised laugh slipped out of her, soft and rusty. Thank you, she said. Lily nodded, then ran to catch up with the others. In the sudden quiet after the front door closed and the sound of shouting and boots faded down the walk, the kitchen looked bigger and messier. Cereal crunched under Grace's shoe. The smoke from the ruined toast had already thinned, leaving a faint, bitter smell. Miles came back in, stuffing his keys into his pocket. Bus stop is at the corner, he said. I walk them when I can. Today was a run, not a walk. He scrubbed a hand over his face, then looked at her. I am sorry, he said. About the interrogation. They are protective, of each other, of their mom. Nannies have not lasted long and they know it. I told them I'm not a babysitter, Grace said. That probably helped, he answered. A hint of a smile pulled at his mouth. It faded just as quickly. Emily died 2 years ago. They watched her get sick. They watched a lot of people come in and out after that. Nurses, sitters, everyone leaving. They learned not to attach. I understand, Grace said quietly. He nodded, then glanced around at the dishes, the spills, the leaning tower of cereal boxes. You do not have to clean any of this, he said. You do not have to do anything. You can sleep. You can take a shower that does not run out of hot water. You can stare at a wall, whatever you need. She looked at the chaos again, at the sticky rings on the table, at the mug with a crooked heart drawn on it in marker that said Dad in a child's handwriting. Her fingers itched for a dishcloth. I would like to help, she said, if that is all right. The muscles in his shoulders dropped a fraction. It is all right, he said. More than all right. Just do not feel like you owe me. He checked his watch, grimaced. I am going to be late again. Work. There is leftover pizza in the fridge if you get hungry. Guest room is yours. Lock still works. He took a step toward the door, then paused. Grace, he said. She looked up. I am glad you are here, he said simply. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading, the front door clicking shut behind him. The house was suddenly very quiet, the kind of quiet that could feel either empty or full. Grace stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by proof that this was a place where life happened, in all its noisy, messy force. She reached for a dishcloth, turned on the tap, and began to run warm water into the sink. By the time the sink was full of hot, soapy water, Grace could feel her fingers again. Steam rose, fogging the lower part of the window over the sink. Outside the yard lay under a thin crust of snow. A plastic slide poked out of it like a beached boat. Someone had drawn a crooked smiley face in the frost on the glass, the lines just starting to blur. She picked up the first bowl, wiped a smear of soggy cereal from the rim, and lowered it into the water. The simple rhythm of it settled something inside her. Wash, rinse, stack. Spoon, plate, cup. In the old house, she had kept a kitchen spotless because it had to be. Any crumb, any streak had been a reason to snap. Here, no one was watching her. No one demanded she hurry. No one timed her. She still worked quickly. Old habits were stubborn. When the sink was empty and the counters wiped, she found a trash bag under the sink and gathered the cereal boxes, folding them down, pressing air out of the bags. She straightened a magnet on the fridge without thinking, then stopped herself. The fridge door was covered in paper. Drawings, spelling tests, a crumpled flyer for a school carnival. In the middle was a calendar crowded with notes in different colors. Piano Hazel, Tuesday, 4. Dentist all Friday, 3. Mrs. A, late shift. On 3 separate days in the last month, the word nanny had been written, then scratched out. She did not touch those. Her eyes slid to a photo tucked under a magnet at the edge. Emily again, this time outside on a picnic blanket, hair longer kids piled on top of her in a heap. Her eyes were half closed with laughter. Grace stepped back and closed the fridge door. In the living room, the television was off. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, turning dust motes to slow-moving stars. Toys lay in drifts along the baseboards. A stuffed dinosaur stared up from under the coffee table. She walked through the rooms with the detached carefulness of a guest. A hallway lined with more photos, and a bulletin board filled with crooked drawings. A small half bath with a step stool in front of the sink. A laundry room that smelled like soap, and damp cotton baskets of clothes stacked in varying states of clean. On a hook near the back door hung 6 backpacks. 5 small, colorful ones, one larger and worn. She raised a hand to touch the strap of the faded blue one, then let it fall. The house hummed, heater, clock, distant traffic. No shouting, no crash that meant she had done something wrong. Her muscles slowly loosened like someone had turned down a volume she had not realized was so loud. She found a notebook on the coffee table and a pen in the mug on the desk. Sitting on the edge of the couch, she made a list. Toothbrush, socks, shampoo, the kinds of things you did not realize you missed until you had none. She turned the pen in her fingers. She did not write money, but the need sat at the top of the list anyway. The afternoon moved in a quiet drift. She dug in a cupboard until she found tea bags and made a mug, drinking it in small sips while she read the torn front section of the local paper. There was a photo from the town Christmas parade the weekend before, with children on a float dressed as elves, cheeks pink from cold. The clock over the stove ticked past 2, then 3. At 3:30, the front door banged open. "Did you see the snowman on Oak?" Mason shouted. His head fell off. "It did not just fall off," Hazel said. "Somebody kicked it." "Do not step on my drawing," Owen warned. Boots thumped. Backpacks dropped. The hallway filled with voices again. Grace set her mug in the sink and wiped her hands on a dish towel. Her heart beat faster as she stepped into the hall. Liam was the first to see her. He stopped mid-stride, one arm still in the sleeve of his coat. Behind him, the others bunched up like a small wave hitting a rock. "You are still here," Mason blurted. "Yeah," Liam said. "She is." Hazel stared at Grace's hands. "You cleaned the kitchen," she said. It sounded like an accusation. Grace glanced down, suddenly worried she had crossed some invisible line. "I can put things back how they were," she said. Owen frowned. "It looks better." Hazel kicked at a clump of melted snow on the rug. "You did not have to." "I know," Grace said. "I wanted to." Seconds stretched. The house air felt thick. Lily stepped around Liam and moved closer, the rabbit dangling from one hand. "Your shirt is not backwards anymore," Lily said. Grace looked at her and let out a breath she had not noticed she was holding. "I fixed it," she said. Lily nodded as if this was important. "We are hungry," Mason announced. "Do we have snacks?" "It is Wednesday," Liam said. "On Wednesdays we get apple slices and peanut butter. Dad says if we eat fruit all week, we can have ice cream on Fridays." He said it with the solemnity of law. Grace glanced toward the kitchen. "Apples and peanut butter I can handle," she said. "If that is all right." Hazel shrugged with one shoulder, but she did not argue. The children trailed after Grace into the kitchen, stopping just inside the doorway to watch her like skeptics at a magic show. She found the apples in the crisper and peanut butter in the pantry. Her hands remembered the weight of a knife, the feel of fruit under a blade. She sliced the apples into thin wedges, arranged them in a circle around a scoop of peanut butter on a plate. The pattern pleased her. "That is like a flower," Lily said, eyes brightening. "More like a sun," Mason said, grabbing a slice before she could tell him to wait. "Use plates," Liam reminded him. "Dad hates crumbs on the table." "Everybody hates crumbs on the table," Hazel said, rolling her eyes. They divided the slices without fighting, which felt like a victory she had little to do with. Grace leaned against the counter watching them. Owen ate carefully, keeping the peanut butter from his fingers. Mason made a mess on purpose, then licked his hand. Hazel pretended not to care about the arrangement, but fixed it when someone moved a piece out of place. Liam glanced at the clock every few minutes, tracking time in his head. "When does your dad get home?" she asked. "Depends," Liam said. "Sometimes 5, sometimes 6, sometimes later." "Today he said papers," Mason added through a mouthful. "That means later." Owen wiped a smear from the table with his thumb and glanced at her. "Do you work?" he asked. The question hit a place that had been empty so long it startled her. "I used to bake," she said, "in a little bakery a long way from here." "Can you make cookies?" Lily asked. Hazel shot her a look. "Dad said we cannot ask her to do things." Grace shook her head. "It is all right. I like making cookies." She did not say that for 12 years she had made perfect cakes under a gaze that measured the thickness of each layer. Here, there was no order form, no criticism, just 5 faces with crumbs on them. "Do you think you will get a job here?" Liam asked. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were not. He was calculating. Jobs meant money. Money meant options. Options meant leaving. "I hope so," Grace said. "I need to." He nodded as if that answer made sense. Later, when the plates were in the sink and the children spread out with homework and crayons and toy dinosaurs, Grace stood at the front window and watched the street. Snow had started again, light flakes drifting under the streetlights. She could not live off the kindness of a man who barely made it through his days, not forever. Gratitude could turn to resentment in quiet ways. She knew that story. She had lived its uglier version. She needed work, any work. The next morning, when the bus had carried the children away in a blur of backpacks and waving gloves, Grace pulled on her cardigan and the one scarf she had brought, then borrowed a hat from a hook by the door. It was knit from thick yarn, a bit too big, smelling faintly of fabric softener, and the shampoo the children used. She wrote a quick note for Miles and left it on the kitchen table. Went to look around town, back later. Thank you, G. The walk into downtown Willow Harbor took 15 minutes. The air bit at the tip of her nose, but the movement warmed her legs. Small shops lined Main Street. A hardware store, a florist, a barber with a red and white pole, the blinking sign of the city diner where she had sat the night before. Her gaze snagged on the corner building with big windows and a sign painted in curling blue letters. Harbor Books and Coffee. She stopped outside, breath puffing the glass. Inside shelves stood in neat rows. A chalkboard listed drink specials in loopy handwriting. A woman with silver hair sat behind the counter reading from a thick hardcover glasses perched low on her nose. The bell over the door chimed when Grace pushed it open. Warm air wrapped around her, smelling of coffee and old paper. The woman at the counter looked up. She had the kind of face that had seen a lot and forgotten very little. Lines around her mouth and eyes, not from frowning, but from squinting at small print and laughing at the right times. Her sweater was the color of moss. A mug sat near her elbow stain halfway down. "Morning," she said. "You look like you need something hot." Grace rubbed the back of her glove against her cheek, feeling where the cold had reddened it. "I would love a coffee," she said. "If it is not too expensive." The woman tilted her head. "First one is on the house if you tell me your name." Grace hesitated only a second. "Grace Turner." "Joan Miller," the woman said. "Welcome to Harbor Books." She moved with an easy efficiency behind the small espresso machine, hands sure on levers and cups. While the machine hissed and sighed, Joan watched Grace over her shoulder. "You new in town, Grace Turner?" she asked. "Yes," Grace said. "Thought so. I know most of the faces that come through here. Yours is not one of them." She set a paper cup on the counter lid off so the steam could escape. The coffee smelled rich, darker than the watery stuff at the diner. Grace wrapped her hands around it, chasing the heat. "Looking for work," Joan said. It was not a question. Grace set the cup down carefully. "Anywhere that might hire me?" Joan studied her for a long breath. Her gaze rested on the frayed cuff of Grace's cardigan, the scuffed toes of her shoes, the careful way she carried herself without taking up space. "You ever worked in a bookstore?" Joan asked. "No," Grace said. "I worked in a bakery, and I cleaned, and I kept books for a while, the paper kind, not the money kind. I read a lot, but that is not a job." "It is closer than you think," Joan said. She tapped a stack of unboxed paperbacks beside the counter. "I lost my part-timer to college last month. Shelves do not straighten themselves, and tourists do not know what they want until someone puts it in their hand." Her mouth quirked. "You got somewhere to be this morning." Grace thought of the empty guest room at the end of the hall, the quiet kitchen, the list she had made. "No," she said. "Good," Joan said. "Finish your coffee, then help me unpack these. We will see if you and the books get along." By the time the last box of paperbacks sat empty on the floor, Grace had a streak of dust on her cheek and a small ache between her shoulder blades. Harbor Books felt different from the diner and the house. The light here was gentler. It fell through the big front windows and pooled on the scuffed wooden floor. The air held that dry, comforting scent books always carried: ink and glue and 1,000 fingerprints. "Not bad," Joan said. She leaned on the counter, watching Grace slide the last mystery novel into place on the shelf. They had organized by author, then by title. Grace had followed Joan's instructions and still somehow made small adjustments, grouping colors that looked good together, lining the edges so they sat in a clean row. "You did this before," Joan added. "Just my own shelves," Grace said. She stepped back and wiped her hands on her cardigan. "My mother used to say, if the books look right, the room feels right." "Your mother was not wrong," Joan said. "You like coffee." Grace glanced at the chalkboard menu, at the names that meant nothing to her. "I like whatever you made me." That was simple drip. Joan poured another from a fresh pot, this time into a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim. "You got kids?" she asked casually, as if asking about the weather. The question caught Grace in the chest. It was a small thing, the way grief often was. A shadow in the corner of the room. "No," she said. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "I do not." Joan watched her for a moment, then nodded like she had received more information than the single word held. "I used to practice law in Minneapolis," Joan said, changing lanes without making it obvious. "Family court, custody battles, protection orders, people yelling into microphones." "Why did you stop?" Grace asked. Joan shrugged one shoulder. Too much yelling, not enough listening. She tapped at the counter with a blunt fingertip. Now I put the right stories into the right hands. Quieter that way, sometimes more useful. Grace looked around the shop. A boy of about 12 sat cross-legged in the back corner reading a fantasy novel. An older man browsed travel guides with his glasses on the end of his nose. A woman in a parka pushed a stroller past the window, the baby's hat bobbing out of sight. It felt safe. That was the word her body chose, even if her mind was not ready to trust anything that much. "How many hours can you give me?" Joan asked. "I am not a chain store. I cannot pay much, but I can let you hide behind the counter when you need to." Grace thought of the calendar on Miles's fridge. School hours blocked in bright marker. Evenings full of kid things. "When the children are at school," she said. "Most days. I am helping someone with his kids the rest of the time." Joan's eyebrows flicked up. "A widower," Grace said. "He has feet." "5?" Joan repeated. "Does he know what birth control is?" Grace almost choked on her coffee. A laugh escaped quick in surprise, startling both of them. "There was only supposed to be one," she said, remembering the names printed on the border of that hospital photo. "They all came at once." Joan smiled, satisfied. "All right, then. A woman who can survive 5-7-year-olds and still alphabetize my shelves is someone I want around." She reached under the counter and pulled out a small stack of papers, already clipped together. "This is the official part. Emergency contacts, tax form, schedule sketch. We will see how it feels for a week. If we both still like each other after that, we can call it a job." Grace stared at the forms. Her name would go on them, her new name in ink. There was a tremor in her chest, something like hope, something like fear. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet," Joan replied. "Wait until I make you clean the bathroom." The bell over the door chimed as a customer left arms full of wrapped books. Snow drifted in behind them, sparkling in the light before it melted. Grace walked back to Miles's house that afternoon with a folded schedule in her pocket and the faint taste of good coffee still on her tongue. The porch light was off in the pale winter daylight, but she knew without thinking which key hook by the door held his set of spares. Her fingers closed around the one labeled front in black marker. Inside, the house smelled like it had. That morning, a little like toast, a little like crayons. She changed the note on the table, adding a single line. "Found work at a bookstore. We can talk later if that is all right." She spent an hour straightening the living room in small, careful ways. She did not move any of the photos or change the arrangement of the furniture. She just stacked the board games so they would not fall if someone looked at them too hard, folded a throw blanket over the back of the couch, and corralled the stray plastic dinosaurs into one corner as if they had their own pen. At 3:30, the storm of children rolled through the front door again. "She is still here," Mason announced, as if he had been secretly taking bets with himself. "Of course she is still here," Hazel said. Her tone was dismissive, but there was a tightness around her mouth. Liam spotted the note on the table and read it before anyone else. "You got a job," he said. It was not accusation or approval, just a statement. "At Harbor Books," Grace said, "on Main Street." "That is Joan's store," Hazel said. "She gives us old magazines sometimes if they do not sell." "She has a dog," Mason added. "He is huge." "He is not huge," Owen said. "He is medium." Grace smiled. "He was asleep behind the counter when I was there. He snored." "That means she likes you," Hazel said. "Who the dog?" Mason asked. "Joan," Hazel said. "She does not let people near moose if she does not like them." Grace tucked that away, a small unexpected warmth. "Do you have to leave more now?" Liam asked. His eyes did not leave her face. "I will only be at the store while you are at school," Grace said. She heard how careful her voice was and did not change it. "I will be here when you get home." Liam considered that, then gave a short nod as if confirming some private calculation. The afternoon settled into a new rhythm. Homework spread over the table, pencils scratched. Lily colored outside the lines, on purpose humming to herself. Mason built a fortress out of cereal boxes Grace had forgotten to break down, then defended it with the plastic dinosaurs. When the sun dipped low, casting long bars of orange through the kitchen, Grace started dinner. She did not attempt anything ambitious. Pasta from a box jarred sauce, a bag of frozen peas she found behind a tub of ice cream. The last time she had cooked for more than 2 people, she had been expected to turn food into art. Plating had mattered more than taste. Here, no one was watching over her shoulder. No one was waiting with a camera and a credit card. The noodles stuck together. The peas were a little softer than ideal. The sauce splattered on the stove. Lily declared it the best thing she had ever eaten. Mason asked if they could have it every night. Hazel silently reached for seconds. Miles arrived in a rush halfway through the meal, hair damp from snow coat half unbuttoned. "Sorry," he said, breathless. "Traffic. End-of-year reports. You saved them." He said it to Grace, but he was looking at the children, noting the lack of disaster, the way Lily's face was smeared with sauce instead of tears. "We saved ourselves," Mason said. "Grace only boiled the noodles." Miles's eyebrows rose. "You cooked?" Grace wiped her hands on a towel. "Just pasta." "Just pasta has defeated me more than once," he said. Later, as the children got ready for bed, the house shifted into a different kind of noise. Water running, toothbrushes clacking against mugs, the thud of dresser drawers. Grace carried a laundry basket up the stairs, the warmth of clean clothes seeping through the fabric against her hip. She passed the bathroom and heard a small, frustrated sound. Lily stood on the stool in front of the mirror, hair a wild halo around her head. A brush lay on the counter at a defeated angle. Her eyes were glossy with held-back tears. "Everything all right?" Grace asked softly from the doorway. Lily bit her lip. "I cannot make it flat," she said. "It hurts when I brush it. Mom used to make it pretty." The last word cracked around the edges. Grace set the laundry basket down in the hall. "Can I help?" she asked. "You can say no." Lily looked at her reflection, then at the brush, then at Grace. After a beat, she nodded. Grace stepped into the room and closed the toilet lid so she could sit. She patted the space in front of her. "Sit down," she said. "We will go slow." Lily climbed onto the closed lid and sat cross-legged, spine straight, small shoulders tight. Grace picked up the brush. It was a simple plastic one, a few bristles already bent. She started at the very ends of Lily's hair, working carefully through the smallest tangles, holding the strands firmly enough that any pull did not tug Lily's scalp. Her hands remembered this motion from a lifetime ago. Not with Lily, but with herself standing in a bathroom, with steam on the mirror, while her mother hummed under her breath and worked out the knots. "My mom used to say hair has a mind of its own," Grace said quietly. "You cannot fight it. You have to persuade it." Lily watched her in the mirror. "How do you persuade hair?" "You are gentle with it," Grace said. "You take your time. You do not yank when it is being stubborn." She hummed not quite a song, more a pattern of sounds that rose and fell like breathing, the same one her mother had used without words. The bathroom light buzzed overhead. Water dripped in the tub from a faucet that did not quite shut all the way. Lily's shoulders slowly dropped. The tension went out of her neck. Her eyelids fluttered. "Can you do a braid?" Lily asked. "I can try," Grace said. When the last tangle was gone, she gathered the soft, straightened hair into 3 sections and crossed them over one another, fingers moving with careful certainty. The braid fell over Lily's shoulder neat and even. Lily touched it with the tips of her fingers as if it might vanish. "It looks like when Mom did it," she whispered. Grace swallowed. "Your mom had good taste." Lily turned and leaned forward without warning, wrapping her arms around Grace's waist. The hug was fierce and sudden. Grace froze, then lowered one hand to the small of Lily's back. The child's heart beat against her ribs. "Thank you," Lily said into her shirt. Grace's throat felt tight. "You are welcome." After Lily padded off to her room, braid swinging, Grace finished folding the laundry on the guest room bed. She smoothed the shirt of Miles's, then set it aside, aware of the odd intimacy of touching things that did not belong to her. A soft knock came at the open door. Owen stood there, his hand resting on the frame. He held a sheet of paper, edges curled. "Hi," Grace said. "Do you need something?" He stepped inside, holding out the page without a word. It was a school assignment. At the top, the teacher had written, "My family." The space below was mostly blank except for a small house drawn in the corner. "I do not know how to draw her," Owen said, eyes on the paper. "Mom, I forget her nose, or her hair sometimes." He spoke matter-of-factly, but his fingers crumpled the edge of the page. Grace set the folded shirt down. "Can I see pictures of her?" she asked. Owen nodded. "Dad has some in his room. He does not like to look at them. He gets quiet." "Let us be quiet together then," Grace said. They crossed the hall to Miles's bedroom. She paused at the threshold, aware she was stepping into a private space. But Owen walked in with the unthinking confidence of a child who had never been told he did not belong. On the dresser propped against the mirror stood several framed photos. Emily, at the lake hair in a scarf, laughing as the wind caught it. Emily in a hospital gown, holding 5 tiny bundles. Emily in a faded concert shirt, sitting on a couch with all 5 children piled around her like puppies. "She was beautiful," Grace said. Owen nodded. Her laugh was loud. "I can see that," Grace said. He picked up one frame, the hospital picture, and held it close, studying his mother's face. "I remember her reading," he said. Her voice was scratchy. She made the frog sounds. "Then you can draw that," Grace said. "Not her nose, not exactly. You can draw her reading in bed or on the couch. You can draw the blanket she always used, or the mug she put her tea in, the way you felt, warm or safe. Owen considered this. My teacher said we have to draw everyone. You can draw everyone too, Grace said. You, your brothers, your sisters, your dad, all in one place. However you remember feeling, most like a family. They took the paper and the frame back to the coffee table. Owen sat on the floor, tongue between his teeth, as he started to draw. He made small, careful lines, pausing, often glancing up at the photo, then down again. Grace sat nearby, folding the last of the laundry. She did not hover, she just stayed. The front door opened quietly an hour later. Miles stepped in, shoulders dusted with snow, fingers reddened by the cold. He smelled like outside air and printer ink. He spotted them in the living room and stopped. Owen looked up. Hi, Dad. Hey, buddy, Miles said. His gaze dropped to the paper in Owen's hands. What are you working on? Homework, Owen said. We have to draw our family. He held up the picture. He had drawn the couch in the living room. On it sat 5 small figures, their hair and heights different enough to tell them apart if you knew them. Beside them, a taller shape with a blanket over her knees held an open book. Another figure stood nearby, a mug in one hand. That is Mom, Owen said, pointing at the figure with the blanket. And that is you. You would not sit. You always got up to get things. Miles's face went very still. For a heartbeat, Grace thought he might cry right there in the middle of the room. It is good, he said, voice low. It is really good. Owen seemed satisfied and went back to adding details, drawing little lines to show the sound of the frog voice coming out of the book. Miles cleared his throat and looked at Grace. Thank you, he said. He did not say for what. He did not have to. Later that night, after the children had been tucked in and the dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, Grace stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold enough to bite, but she welcomed it. Her breath rose in pale clouds. She watched it fade. The porch light glowed above her, casting a small circle of gold on the snow. In the distance, Willow Lake lay dark and flat under its shell of ice. Behind her, the house murmured with the quiet sounds of sleep. Pipes, a door settling, a child turning over in bed. She sat on the top step, pulled her knees close, and rested her chin on them. Her hand found the spoon at her neck. Its metal was cool now, matching the air. She breathed in slow and steady. For the first time in a long time, the sound of her own breath did not feel like the only thing keeping her upright. Rain came to Willow Harbor in a gray, steady sheet. It started as a thin mist in the morning and thickened by late afternoon, drumming softly on the roof, streaking the window panes in the living room. The yard blurred. The swing set in the back seemed to float in a shallow lake. Inside, the house felt smaller, crowded with bodies and sound. The children were restless. They bounced off the furniture and each other hands, grabbing, voices rising, then falling, then rising again. By dinner, the air was warm and humid. The kitchen window fogged from boiling water. Grace wiped her hands on a towel and stirred the pot on the stove. Can we go outside? Mason asked for the 4th time, forehead pressed to the glass. It is pouring, Liam said. You will get sick. You cannot get sick from rain, Mason argued. You can if you stay in wet clothes, Hazel snapped. She was in a foul mood. Her hair was a cloud of curls frizzed by the damp. Every time she pushed it back, it sprang forward again. She glared at everyone and at nothing, picking a fight with whatever moved. At the table, Owen drew raindrops on the corner of his math worksheet. Lily lined up her crayons by color, oblivious to the argument about weather and disease. By the time the plates were cleared and the dishes rinsed, the mood had not improved. Bath then pajamas, Miles said. He pointed down the hall. Mason, Lily, go start the water. Lukewarm, not cold, not lava. Last time it was almost lava, Lily accused. You turned the knob, Mason shot back. They thundered off the bathroom door, squealing as it opened. Hazel stomped up the stairs. Grace heard her bedroom door slam. The sound ran down the walls. Miles sighed. I will go talk to her. I can, Grace said. He hesitated. She might bite. I have dealt with biters, Grace said, and with worse. His eyes searched her face for a second, then he nodded. Her room is the second on the left, he said. Good luck. In the hallway upstairs, the light was softer. The air still smelled faintly of tomato sauce and clean soap. Grace paused outside Hazel's door. A muffled noise came through it like something hitting a wall. She knocked lightly with her knuckles. Hazel, she called. Can I come in? Go away, Hazel shouted. Her voice was thick. Grace waited. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe, feeling the old wood under her shirt. I will just sit here then, she said, in case you change your mind. Silence followed, broken only by the rain drumming on the roof and the distant roar of the bathroom fan. After a while, the sound of movement inside the room slowed. The door cracked open just enough for one brown eye to peer out. "What?" Hazel demanded. Her cheeks were flushed. Her hair was a wild tangle around her head. The brush lay on the floor behind her, bristles clogged and bent. A hair tie hung from one wrist like a defeated flag. "I wanted to see if you were all right," Grace said. "Can I come in?" Hazel hesitated, then opened the door wider. The anger in her face had curdled into something more fragile. The room was small walls crowded with posters and drawings, a shelf of books, a desk with a lamp tilted to one side, clothes spilled out of an open drawer. On the bed, a stuffed fox lay on its back, one button eye missing. "It will not work," Hazel said, picking the brush up and dropping it again. "It just gets bigger and bigger. Mom always made it soft. Now it looks like a bush." Her voice broke on the last word. Grace stepped fully inside and closed the door behind her. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the edge of the bed. Hazel shrugged, but it was as close to a yes as she was likely to give. Grace sat. The mattress dipped slightly under her weight. "When I was your age," she said, "my mom used to stand behind me in the bathroom and brush my hair every night. I would tell her stories about school. She would hum the same song over and over until I could not tell if I remembered the words or if my head made them up." Hazel glanced at her. "Did she make your hair not look stupid?" "She tried," Grace said. "My hair and I did not always agree." Hazel's hand went up to her own curls. "Mom said mine was special," she muttered. "She said it meant I was strong." "She was right," Grace said. Hazel swallowed hard. "Can I try?" Grace asked. "If you hate it, you can tell me to stop." Hazel looked at the brush, then at the mirror, then at Grace. "Fine," she said. The word came out like a dare. Grace moved to sit behind her on the edge of the bed. She picked up the brush and started at the very ends of Hazel's hair, just like she had with Lily. The curls were tighter, more stubborn. She held each small section gently, working out tiny knots without yanking. Hazel flinched once, then settled. In the mirror above the dresser, their eyes met. Hazel quickly looked away. "So," Grace said softly, "your mom used to brush it at night." "Sometimes in the morning," Hazel said. "If I slept funny, she would say I fought dragons in my dreams." Her voice grew quiet. "They did not give her the good shampoo in the hospital, but she still did my hair, even when she was tired." Rain hit the window in a sudden gust. The sound filled the pause. "My mom was a baker," Grace said. "Her hands always smelled like sugar and flour. When she brushed my hair, I could smell cinnamon too. She would tell me about the pies she made." "What happened to her?" Hazel asked. "She died," Grace answered. The words sat between them, plain and heavy. Hazel's shoulders hunched. "From cancer?" "No," Grace said. "Something else. It was a long time ago." She did not say more. Hazel did not ask. The tangles slowly gave way. The brush moved higher through smoother sections now. Grace's hands were steady. Her breath matched the rhythm stroke by stroke. A small sound escaped Hazel, barely more than a sigh. Her posture relaxed. Her head tilted back a fraction into the touch. "Do you know any songs?" Hazel asked suddenly. Grace's throat tightened. "Maybe one," she said. She did not have her mother's voice, but she had the memory of it. She let the melody rise simple and low, a tune about a river and a willow tree and someone who did not walk alone. The notes filled the small room, mingling with the patter of rain. Hazel's eyes closed in the mirror. When Grace finished the song, the last knot was gone. Hazel's hair fell in softer curls down her back instead of sticking out in defiance. "Do you want a braid?" Grace asked. Hazel nodded. Grace gathered 3 sections and began to weave them together. Hazel watched in the mirror, lips pressed tight, trying not to smile. When the braid was done, it lay over Hazel's shoulder, neat and secure. Grace tied it with the hair tie from Hazel's wrist. Hazel stood up and walked to the mirror, leaning close. She reached up and touched the braid. "It looks like when Mom did it," she whispered. Grace met her eyes in the glass. "Your mom had good taste," she said. Hazel turned so fast, Grace almost did not see it coming. The girl threw her arms around Grace's middle and held on, face pressed into her shirt. The hug was hard, almost desperate. Grace froze for a second, every muscle unsure. Then her arms moved on their own, wrapping around Hazel's shoulders. Hazel's hair still held the faint scent of children's shampoo fruit, and something synthetic undercut now by the clean smell of rain. "I miss her," Hazel said into the fabric. The words were thick with tears. "Even when I am not crying, I still miss her." "I know," Grace said. Her own eyes burned. "That does not go away." Hazel cried quietly. No sobs, no wails, just a steady leak of tears that left a damp patch on Grace's shirt. They stayed like that for a long time. The room dimmed as the sky outside darkened. The rain softened to a drizzle. Eventually, Hazel pulled back. She scrubbed at her face with the back of her hand, then scowled at her own wet cheeks. "If you tell anyone I did that, I will deny it," she said. Grace nodded solemnly. "Your secret is safe with me." Hazel sniffed. "Do you know how to make French toast?" she asked, as if that question were the natural next step. "I do," Grace said. "Maybe you can teach Dad," Hazel said. "His is weird." "I will see what I can do," Grace replied. Hazel climbed into bed without complaining, braid resting on her pillow. Grace pulled the blanket up and turned off the light, leaving the door open a crack. In the hallway, her legs felt unsteady. She leaned a hand against the wall. Downstairs, the television murmured softly in the living room. The glow from it spilled into the hall as she descended the stairs. Miles sat on the couch, one ankle propped on his knee, papers spread across the coffee table. His tie was off, tossed over the back of a chair. His eyes were on a spreadsheet, but his focus had the dullness of someone who had been looking at numbers too long. He glanced up when she entered. "Hey," he said, "how did it go?" "Her hair looks excellent," Grace said. His eyebrows rose. "She let you touch it." "After she threw the brush at the wall," Grace said. Miles let out a low whistle. "She has not let anyone do her hair since the last time Emily was in the hospital. She would rather go outside with it in knots than let me near it." "She misses her," Grace said, "even when she acts like she does not." "We all do," Miles said. He gathered his papers into a stack, set them aside, and patted the space on the couch next to him. "Sit," he said. "Tea." "There is still some in the pot," she said. "I will get it." In the kitchen, she reheated the kettle and poured hot water over the tea bags, watching the color seep into the cups. The small domestic motion calmed her hands. When she brought the mugs back, the television was off. The only light came from the lamp in the corner and the soft glow from the kitchen. She sat at the opposite end of the couch. The cushions sagged between them. They drank in silence for a few moments. "Thank you," Miles said. He was looking at his mug, not at her. "For the hair?" she asked. "For being someone she trusts enough to throw a brush near," he said. A trace of humor eased his features. It faded as he added, "For being kind. To them. To me." Grace stared at the steam rising from her tea. "You keep thanking me," she said quietly, "as if I am doing you a favor." "Aren't you?" he asked. "You walked into a house full of strangers and took on 5 grieving children without a contract or a paycheck. That counts." "I needed somewhere to go," she said. "You gave it to me. That counts too." He looked at her, then really looked, the way he had that first night in the diner, but deeper now. His gaze lingered on the fading bruise at her jaw, the way she still sometimes held herself like she was ready to duck. "You said before," he began, choosing each word, "that you had to get out, that if you stayed you were not sure you would survive it." She did not remember telling him that, but she did remember the feeling, standing on the bridge, the water moving under the ice. "I did," she said. "If you ever want to tell me about it," he said, "you can. If you do not, that is all right too." The lamp hummed. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the eaves outside, tapping against the metal of the gutter. Grace set her mug down carefully, aligning it with a ring on the coaster. "I was 19, she said. The words came out small at first, like a child testing a cold pool with her toes. "My father knew Daniel's family. They had money. We did not." She laced her fingers together in her lap, thumb rubbing the edge of the spoon pendant under her shirt. "Daniel picked me," she went on. "That is how he said it. He could have had anyone, and he picked me. My father told me to be grateful. He said I would never have to worry about bills or rent or late notices. He said I would be taken care of." Miles did not move. He did not interrupt. "The first year," she said, "he did not hit me. He did not have to. He just narrowed things." She could still see it sharp as broken glass. The way Daniel had smiled when he had taken her phone away, saying she did not need distractions. The way her friends stopped calling after enough unanswered messages. "He did not like my friends," she said. "He said they were a bad influence. He said my mother was too soft, that she made me weak. After she died, he said it was my job to be the woman of the house, his house." Her voice thinned, but she continued. "It was little things, comments, rules. He would say I was lucky. He would remind me he worked hard so I could stay home. When I wanted to get a job at a bakery, he laughed. He said no one would want food from someone who could not even take care of her own kitchen." Her jaw clenched. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her jeans. "The first time he hit me, I broke a glass," she said. "A stupid tumbler from the grocery store. I dropped it, it shattered, and he stepped on a piece. He bled. He got mad. He said it was my fault he was hurt. She remembered the weight of his hand, the shock of it, the sound more than the pain. I thought it was my fault, she said, for a long time. If I had been more careful, quieter, better. Her throat burned. She swallowed it down. It did not stay about glasses, she said. It became about everything. The way I looked at the waiter, the way I folded the towels, the way I laughed at someone's joke. Every time he would find a reason, and every time he would tell me he would not have to do it if I just listened. Her voice almost broke on that word. Miles's hands were curled around his mug so tightly his knuckles were white. He had not realized it until he cut off his own circulation. He loosened his fingers, flexed them once, then let them rest. They said I could not have children, Grace said. Doctors, tests. Daniel said my body was broken, that I was broken, that I owed him everything else because I could not give him that. She pressed her palm flat over her abdomen, as if trying to shield it even now. I got pregnant 12 years in, she said. A small, incredulous laugh slipped out. After all that time, after all those appointments and pills and charts. I did not tell him at first. I wanted to be sure. I went to see Dr. Patel by myself. She confirmed it. Her eyes went distant, focusing on a memory only she could see. For 4 weeks it was mine, she said. Just mine. I would wake up and put my hand there and think, there you are. I would bake in my head. I would imagine little hands on the counter, flour everywhere. One tear slipped free. She did not brush it away. Then we went to this party, she said. Business stuff. His friends, his partners. One of them told me I looked nice. That was all. I smiled. I said thank you. She inhaled sharp. On the drive home he was quiet. I knew that quiet. When we got inside he started. He said I was embarrassing him, flirting, trying to make him look weak. I tried to explain. I told him it was nothing. I told him he was wrong. Her fingers dug into the cushion. When he would not stop, I told him about the baby, she said. I thought it would change something. I thought if he knew, he would be careful, that he would see me as more. Her mouth twisted. He called me a liar, she said I was trying to trap him, said if there was a baby, it was not his. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I woke up in the hospital, she said. Dr. Patel was there. She held my hand and told me the baby was gone, that there had been too much damage, that I was lucky to be alive. The word lucky scraped. They asked me what happened, she said. I told them I fell, down the stairs, in the shower. It was always something like that. She drew in a shaky breath. That night lying in that bed, I realized if I went home, I would die, she said. Not maybe, not someday, soon. It felt like something snapped back into place, like I remembered my own voice. She looked at him, then eyes wet and dark. I told Dr. Patel the truth, she said. All of it. She believed me. She said she could help me disappear. She knew people. She had seen too many women come back on stretchers. She did not want to see me on one. The spoon at her neck felt heavy. We faked it, she said. The paperwork, the report. There was enough blood for it to be believable. Daniel liked drama. He liked to be seen grieving. So, when she told him I did not make it, he cried. He yelled. He called me selfish for leaving him alone. And he signed what he needed to sign. Her hands shook now. She folded them together to still them. She told me to go as far as I could with the money she gave me, she said. New name, new place, new life. She promised to keep the records safe. Her mouth twisted. I got on a bus, she said. It took me here, to Willow Harbor. The sign outside the station said families thrive. It seemed like a good joke. Miles watched her chest tight. Someone stole my bag, she said, at the station. All that money, my papers, everything but this. She touched the spoon on its chain. I ended up on that bench, she said. I did not know what to do next. I just knew I could not go back. Her voice went quiet. And then you stopped, she said. You and your beat-up minivan and your burnt toast and your 5 kids. The silence that followed was not empty. It hummed with all the things neither of them had tried to say before. Miles set his mug down carefully as if it were made of glass. You did not deserve any of that, he said. Each word was slow and steady. For a long time I thought I did, she said. That if I had been better, he would have been kinder. That if I had kept the glass from breaking, he would not have stepped on it. That is his story, Miles said, not yours. Her lips parted on a breath she had not expected to take. You are not broken, he said. You are not what he told you you were. Her hand tightened around the spoon. You are here, he said. You survived. That is not nothing. She looked at him, searching for signs of pity, of revulsion, of the way people sometimes recoiled from ugliness they could not fix. All she found was anger that was not directed at her, and something else quieter that she did not have a name for. He reached over, moving slowly enough that she could see every inch of his hand. He laid his fingers lightly over her knuckles, not closing, just resting there. "If you want to leave," he said, "I will help you. If you want to stay, I will make room. You are not a burden, Grace. Not to me, not to them." Her throat burned. Tears spilled over hot on her cheeks. "I am tired," she said. "I know," he answered. She turned her hand under his, lacing their fingers together, a small, careful act. The lamp hummed. The house sighed. Outside, the rain had stopped, and somewhere water found its path through the gutters, heading toward the dark, steady river under the ice. Winter did not last forever, even in Minnesota. It loosened its grip slowly. The snow along the sidewalks turned from crisp white to tired gray, then to slush. The ice on Willow Lake cracked along its edges, water seeping through in dark lines. The porch light over Miles's front door shone through all of it, a small constant in the shifting weather. Life in the house settled into a pattern. On weekdays, mornings began with the same swirl of noise and motion, but it changed in texture. There were still arguments about whose turn it was to sit by the window on the bus and whose socks were warmer, but someone usually remembered to turn off the stove before the toast burned. Grace started to recognize the sound of each child's laugh from the top of the stairs. Liam developed a habit of checking the front door twice before they left, hand flat against the lock, shoulders straight. Hazel learned to braid her own hair on mornings when they were running late, fingers moving with quiet competence. Owen kept a small notebook in his pocket and wrote down words he liked. Mason tried out new knock-knock jokes at breakfast, most of them terrible, all of them delivered with complete sincerity. Lily made up songs about whatever was happening, her voice floating down the hall like a bird that had wandered inside. Most mornings, Grace stood in the kitchen with a mug of tea, hair pulled back, cardigan sleeves rolled, watching it all. Sometimes she intervened, adjusting a collar or sliding a lunchbox into the right backpack. Sometimes she just took it in, committing it to memory, each small scene stacking on top of the last. When the bus pulled away from the corner, the house fell quiet again. Miles would grab his briefcase, shrug into his coat, and pause at the door. "You have your key," he would ask. She would pat her pocket. "I have my key. Text me if you need anything." "I will." In the hours that followed, she took the bus into town for her shift at Harbor Books. The shop became its own kind of refuge. Joan showed her how to work the register, how to read the regular customers by the kinds of questions they asked. The retired teacher who never bought anything but always wanted recommendations for her imaginary book club. The teenage girl who came for graphic novels and left with poetry. The man who pretended not to like romance novels and then checked one out every other week, slipping it under a stack of thrillers. "You do not need a law degree for this," Joan said one afternoon, as Grace shelved returns. "You just need to pay attention." Grace discovered she liked the wait of a day at the store, the small conversations, the feel of sliding books into place, the quiet satisfaction when a customer came back and said, "You were right, I love that one." On slow days, Joan talked. She told stories about Minneapolis, about messy divorces and custody hearings that dragged for months, about nights staring at files until her eyes hurt, wondering if she had actually helped anyone or just rearranged their suffering. "There was this one case," Joan said once, leaning back on her stool. "Woman with 2 kids, sweet as anything, scared of her own shadow. Judge gave the husband shared custody, said there was not enough proof of what he had done. I saw the bruise on her jaw when she came in to thank me for nothing. That was the day I started looking at bookstore listings." Grace listened to hands still. She did not ask what had happened to the woman. She was afraid to know. "You did the right thing leaving," Joan said without naming Daniel, "whatever it cost you." Grace's chest tightened. She nodded more to herself than to Joan. Spring tipped into summer. The trees along Maple Street leafed out in a soft green that deepened as the months passed. The children finished second grade, then started third. The house filled with end-of-year art projects and permission slips and one lopsided clay bowl that Lily insisted was a perfect cereal dish and should be used as such. On the first truly warm weekend, Miles dragged an old grill out from the garage, brushed off a winter's worth of dust, and bought a bag of charcoal that crinkled loudly in his hands. "I am not guaranteeing anything about how this will taste," he told Grace as he shook the briquettes into the grill, "just that it will be cooked over fire." "You are very brave," she said. He glanced at her, mouth tipping up. Neighbors drifted over as the smell of smoke and meat spread. Mrs. Alvarez brought a foil pan of rice and beans. A couple from across the street carried over a bowl of potato salad. The children ran between yards, barefoot, squealing, chasing one another with water guns until their shirts stuck to their backs. Grace stood at the edge of the yard, plastic cup in hand, watching. The sunlight made her squint. Laughter bounced off fences. It hit her then, sudden and sharp, that she was not watching as a passerby peeking in on a life through glass. She was inside it. Lily crashed into her side, wet arms looping around her waist. "You are on my team," Lily declared. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair stuck to her forehead in damp curls. "Your team for what?" Grace asked. "The not getting wet team," Lily said, already pulling her toward the porch. "We hide, then we jump out." "I am not sure that is how not getting wet works," Grace said. Lily looked up at her with complete confidence. "It will if we do it right." They did not do it right. 10 minutes later, both of them stood in the kitchen dripping on the tile, laughing breathless. Miles leaned in the doorway, spatula in hand, watching them. His eyes crinkled at the corners. "You traitor," he said to Grace. "I thought you were going to keep them from destroying the house." "I tried," she said. "I failed." "Welcome to the club," he replied. When fall returned, it came with a bite in the air and a burst of color in the trees. The children started talking about Halloween costumes in September. Harbor books filled the front display with thrillers and ghost stories. Joan added a bowl of candy to the counter and pretended not to see when kids took more than one piece. Grace found a rhythm between the bookstore and the house. The days were still full, but they no longer felt like a scramble to keep up. There were routines now: pancakes on Saturdays, movie nights when Miles did not have to work late, Sunday trips to the grocery store, where they filled a cart to overflowing and still somehow ran out of milk by Wednesday. The more time passed, the less she jumped at sudden noises. The bruises faded completely. The nightmares did not disappear, but they came less often, and when they did, there was always the small anchoring fact of the lock on the inside of her door and the murmur of a house around her that did not threaten, only lived. She started a small garden in the strip of dirt along the backyard fence. Nothing dramatic. A few tomato plants, a row of beans, some herbs she had grown in pots before and knew she could keep alive. The children helped in bursts. Mason dug holes that were too deep. Lily named every worm they turned up. Owen made small labels for each plant in his careful handwriting. Hazel pretended not to care, then complained if someone watered the basil too much. Liam kept track of when they had last weeded tapping dates into a second-hand watch with tiny buttons. Miles knelt beside Grace one afternoon as she staked a tomato plant that had grown taller than she expected. "These look good," he said. He squinted at a cluster of small green globes. "Are they supposed to be this color?" "They will turn red," she said. "They need time." "Like everything," he said. His arm brushed hers as he shifted his weight. She felt the contact in the center of her chest. There were more moments like that. Mismatched accidental touches that did not feel accidental. Hands brushing when they both reached for the same plate. Knees knocking under the table when they sat side by side helping Mason with a science project. A glance held a fraction longer than it needed to be when one of them said something that made the other laugh. On late nights when the children had finally worn themselves out and the dishwasher hummed in the kitchen, they found themselves on the couch, a shared magnet pulling them to the same spot. Sometimes they watched an episode of something forgettable and made comments under their breath. Miles would groan at plot holes, and Grace would quietly defend the characters even when they made terrible decisions. Sometimes they did not turn on the television at all. They sat with mugs of tea or glasses of water, talking about small things, movies from their childhoods, favorite meals. The weirdest customer Joan had that week. The time Miles had accidentally sent a personal email to his entire office. The bigger things crept into those conversations too gently, like animals that needed coaxing. Miles told her about Emily in pieces, not all at once. How they met in a college biology lab when he spilled a tray of slides and she helped him pick up the shards. How she had loved the lake in summer, but hated the way the wind cut through her coat in winter. How she had insisted on reading to the kids, even when the chemo had left her too tired to stand. "It was hard to know when to stop," he said once, staring at his hands. "The doctors kept saying there was one more trial, one more thing we could try. She was the one who said no. She said she was tired of hospitals. She wanted to come home." His voice caught. Grace had set her cup down and listened her own grief rising to meet his different and the same. "She did not want them to remember her in that bed," he said. "But they do. I can see it sometimes. In the way they look at the hospital on TV. In the way Lily panics when someone coughs too long." "You did what you could," Grace said softly. "It never feels like enough," he said. "You stayed," she said. "That is something." He had looked at her, then eyes dark as if he wanted to say something else and did not. Time moved. Third grade shifted to fourth. At Harbor Books, Grace became the person Joan trusted to run the shop when she had to go to appointments or simply needed a day off. "You have a good head," Joan said, handing over the keys one morning, "and a decent instinct for when someone is about to stick a romance novel into their bag without paying." Moose, the large, sleepy dog, took to laying his head on Grace's feet behind the counter. She found the weight comforting. Sometimes in the quiet between customers, her mind wandered. To the hospital room, to Dr. Patel, to a man in another city who thought she was dead. The fear did not disappear. It just no longer controlled the direction of every thought. It lived in a smaller corner, watched but not fed. One late afternoon near the start of their second winter, the sky outside Harbor Books turned the flat white color that meant snow was coming. Grace straightened a display of cookbooks, fingers trailing along glossy covers. A familiar figure appeared on the other side of the glass shoulders, dusted with early flakes. Miles pushed the door open, bringing a gust of cold air with him. The bell chimed. "You are early," Grace said, glancing at the clock. Her shift still had an hour. "Traffic was sweet to me for once," he said. "Kids are at Mrs. A's. I thought I would kidnap you." Joan looked up from her perch at the back with one eyebrow raised. "For dinner," Miles added quickly. His ears flushed. "The kidnapping is fully consensual." Grace laughed. "You do not have to take me anywhere," she said. "I have food at home." "You have my cooking at home," he said, which is not the same thing. Joan snorted. "Take her," she said. She worked through her break. "I am not running a sweatshop." "I still have an hour," Grace protested. "I will survive," Joan said. "Go, before the roads turn to ice." Miles leaned his elbows on the counter. "Come on," he said. "Harbor Diner has a special on something that looked edible. You can tell me what I did wrong with the tomato plants. Again." "They needed more water," she said. "That sounds like something you would say to a person," he replied. She hesitated then, untied the apron Joan insisted staff wear, hanging it on its hook. She grabbed her coat from the peg and pulled it on, tucking her hair into the collar. Outside, the air pinched her cheeks. Snow fell in soft, slow flakes, drifting onto her eyelashes. She brushed them away with gloved fingers. They walked side by side down Main Street, boots crunching on the salt scattered over the sidewalk. Their shoulders brushed once, then again. Neither of them moved away. The neon sign of the diner flickered ahead, casting pink and blue onto the wet pavement. Grace glanced up at Miles, watching the way his breath came out in visible bursts, the way he tucked his chin into his scarf. She thought of the first night she had walked into that diner with him cold and numb and ready to bolt. This felt nothing like that night. Her hands were not shaking. Her stomach did not twist from fear. There was warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coat she wore. He looked down at her at the same moment and smiled quick and unguarded. Something settled between them, invisible and real, like the air right before snow finally gives in and falls. Snow came hard that night, but they made it home full and warm. The diner had been loud enough that their conversation had to lean in, bending the space between them. They talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Miles told a story about Emily convincing him to jump off the dock into Willow Lake in April when the water was still half ice. Grace confessed she had never learned to swim. "You live next to a lake and you do not swim?" he asked. "I lived next to a man who thought water was for show," she said, "not for joy." He had gone quiet at that, the muscle in his jaw ticking once. Then he switched to a gentler topic without making a point of it. Later, after the kids were asleep and the house had settled, Grace lay in her narrow bed and watched the faint reflection of the porch light on her ceiling. She could hear Miles moving in his room, the soft thump of a drawer, the creak of the bed springs. Her heart thudded in answer to each small sound. Days slid into one another. The season turned again. Snow melted. The lake thawed. The tomato plants in the garden died and were replaced by neat rows of carrots and zucchini. Whatever sat between Grace and Miles grew without either of them naming it. She felt it when his hand brushed hers as they passed plates at dinner, and neither of them pulled away. She heard it in the way he said her name when he came in late from work, like it was the part of the house he was most glad to see. She saw it in the children's eyes when they caught the two of them laughing at something in the kitchen, the quick flicker of understanding that passed between siblings without words. She told herself not to read into it, not to tilt her life towards something that might not be real. For years, wanting had been dangerous. Desire had been the first step toward punishment. Even so, some nights when the air was soft and the house felt especially full, she would stand on the porch and imagine a line in front of her, invisible and bright. One side was where she lived now, in this careful, safe closeness. The other side was something else. She did not know what it looked like, only that it asked for more than she had dared give in a long time. Spring tilted toward summer. Tax season ended. Miles slept a little more, kept his phone on the table less. One Tuesday he forgot his lunch. It was not unusual. He had a habit of leaving things behind. Folders, coffee mugs, the occasional sock that somehow slipped out of the hamper and hid under the table. Usually he bought something from the vending machine and pretended it counted as a meal. That morning, though, he had packed leftovers from the last night's dinner into a container, snapped the lid shut with satisfaction, and set it smack in the middle of the fridge shelf as if staking a claim. Then he had walked out without it. Grace found the container after she got back from dropping off a stack of donated books at the library. It sat there waiting patiently among jars and cartons. She stared at it for a moment, then checked the clock. If she caught the bus on Maple now, she could get to his office with time left in his lunch break. She could hand it to him and make a joke about forgetfulness and brain space. She could step just a little over that invisible line. Her heart beat faster at the thought. Her fingers tapped the edge of the counter. "You do not owe him this," she told herself. No, another part of her answered. "I want to." She grabbed her coat and the container, scribbled a note for the kids in case they came home before she did, and locked the front door behind her. The air outside was mild. The sky a pale blue streaked with high, thin clouds. The snow had long since gone, leaving the lawns patchy and brown, tiny hints of green just starting at the edges. The bus smelled like exhaust and old gum. Grace sat near a window, the lunchbox balanced on her knees, and watched the town slide by. The familiar landmarks came in order. The diner, Harbor Books. The school with its playground empty in the middle of the day. Miles's office building was a square 2-story thing near the edge of downtown, all glass and dull brick. Its small parking lot held more cars than she expected, lined up in tidy rows. Inside the lobby smelled like copier toner and artificial lemon from the cleaner someone had used on the floors. A woman at a reception desk looked up as Grace entered. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I am here to see Miles Carter," Grace said. "If he is free." The woman tilted her head. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Grace said. "I am just dropping this off." She held up the container, a small peace offering in clear plastic. The receptionist's mouth twitched. "He is in his office," she said. "End of the hall on the left. You can go back." Grace walked down the hall, shoes whispering on the thin carpet. The doors on either side had small plaques with names. She read them without meaning to. At the end of the corridor, Miles's door was propped open. Voices drifted out, his and someone else's. "I am telling you, Carter, you need to get rid of that old van," a male voice said. "You are going to get stranded on the interstate with a car full of kids." "That van is fine," Miles replied. "It has character." "It has rust," the other man said. Grace stopped just before the doorway. She could see a sliver of the room, a desk piled with files, a window looking out over the parking lot, a green plant that had somehow survived in the corner. Miles sat in a chair, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked more relaxed than she usually saw him at this time of year. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Besides," he added, "they would mutiny if I tried to change it. They think the squeaky door is good luck." The other man laughed. "You are too soft on them." "That is the job," Miles said. The other man gathered his folders and turned. "All right, I will see you in the meeting." He walked out, nodding at Grace politely as he passed. His eyes flicked to the container in her hands. A knowing smile touched his mouth, there and gone. "Miles," she said. He looked up. For a second his face went blank, like his brain was rebooting. Then it lit the way it always did when one of the kids did something that surprised him, or when Grace walked into a room. "Hey," he said, "what are you doing here?" "You forgot this," she said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. She stepped into the office and set the container on his desk. He glanced at it, then back at her. "You made a special trip just for that. You were very proud of it," she said. "Seemed ashamed to let it go to waste." He stood up. The space between them felt both tiny and huge. The room smelled like coffee paper and the faint citrus of his aftershave. "You did not have to," he said. "I know," she replied. They stood there for a moment, neither sure what to do with their hands. Miles reached for the container, then changed direction halfway and rested his palm on the desk instead. His fingers tapped once, twice, then stilled. "I have been trying not to do this," he said. The words dropped into the quiet like a stone into water. Grace's heartbeat stumbled. "Do what?" He let out a breath, then shook his head, a small frustrated motion. "Pretend," he said. Her throat went dry. "Pretend what?" "That I do not feel what I feel," he said. That when you walk into a room, it is just convenient. That I am just grateful. That it is just about the kids. He laughed once without humor. I told myself it was too soon, he said. That you needed space. That it would be selfish to want anything more. I kept saying if I just waited, if I kept my mouth shut, I could live like this, side by side, friendly, safe, but I cannot. He looked at her, then really looked. His eyes were raw and open. When I hear your key in the door, I can finally breathe, he said. When I wake up and you are in the kitchen, the day feels manageable. When you talk to the kids, when you listen to them, when you sit with them in their grief, like it is not something to fix, but something to carry. I fall a little more. Every time. Her own breath hitched. You do not owe me anything, he said. You do not have to say this back. I just need you to know I am in love with you, Grace. Not because you saved us, because you are you. The room narrowed. The sound of an office printer humming somewhere down the hall faded. All she could hear was her own pulse and the scrape of his chair as he shifted his weight. Her body remembered 1,000 moments when someone else's confession had been a weapon, a way to corner her, to force a response. Her mind tried to brace for impact. But his hand stayed on the edge of the desk, not reaching. His shoulders were tense, but his face was not demanding. It was scared. You have every right to tell me this is too much, he said. To walk out that door and never bring me another forgotten lunch. I will not hold it against you. We will find a way to keep things steady for the kids. I just cannot pretend anymore that you are not the person I think about last at night and first in the morning. Something inside her that had been shut tight for years shifted. No insults followed his words, no conditions, no list of what she had to change to be worthy. She thought of the porch light, of the first time she had seen it glowing over his door, of the nights she had sat under it trying to understand what it meant to be wanted without being trapped. Her eyes burned. You said you have been trying not to do this, she said. I have been trying not to think about it. A flicker of hope crossed his face, quick and cautious. When you come home late and you look tired, she said, I want to make things easier for you. When you laugh with them, I feel it in my chest. When you talk about Emily, I want to keep her memory safe with you. Her voice shook. She let it. I thought if I said any of that out loud, it would disappear, she said, like smoke, or he would show up out of nowhere and rip it away. She took a small step closer, then another. I am scared, she said, not of you, of how much I want this, of what it means to admit that I can want it all. He did not move, but something in his posture softened. His hands lifted a little from the desk, then settled again, holding himself in place. You are allowed to want, he said. The words were simple. They landed deep. I do, she said. I want this. I am in love with you, Miles. I have been for a while. I just did not know what to call it without feeling like I was stealing something that did not belong to me. It belongs to you, he said. His voice caught on the last word. She let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in her chest for years. Okay, she whispered. It was not just an answer. It felt like permission, for both of them. He moved then. Not fast, not grabbing. He walked around the desk, each step small and careful until he was standing in front of her. He lifted one hand, hovering close enough that she could feel the warmth of it along her jaw, but he did not touch. She closed the last of the distance, turning her face into his palm. The contact was like stepping into sunlight. He let out a shaky breath and smiled, slow and disbelieving. Can I kiss you? He asked. Yes, she said. The first brush of his mouth was tentative, more question than claim. Her lips answered. The second kiss was deeper. Years of fear and hunger and hope poured into that narrow space. Her hand slid up to his shoulders. His other hand found the small of her back, resting there with a weight that felt steady, not trapping. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, foreheads almost touching. You okay? He asked. Besorgt. She laughed, surprised at the sound. I am... She searched for the right word. Here. He smiled. Good. Outside the office door, footsteps passed. A voice laughed down the hall. The normal sounds of everyday life moved on. Inside the small room, everything had shifted. They walked home together that evening, like they had 100 times before, but every brush of their arms, every shared glance, felt newly charged. At the corner by the school, his fingers slipped between hers. She let them. The porch light was already on when they turned into the driveway. The sight of it hit her differently now, not just as a symbol of safety, but as an invitation. Inside, the kids were in the living room, a board game spread over the floor. Mason saw them first. They are holding hands, he announced loudly. 4 heads snapped up. Liam's eyes flicked from their joined hands to their faces. Hazel's mouth curved just a little. Owen sat very still. Lily squealed and bounced to her feet. "You are together," Lily said. "Like together, together." Grace's cheeks heated. Miles cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk to you about that," he said. "You took long enough," Hazel said. "Mrs. Alvarez said this would happen months ago." "We had a chart," Mason added. He ran to the side table and came back with a crumpled piece of paper. It had dates scribbled along one side and a list of guesses next to them. Hazel, Liam, Mason, and Owen each had a column. "I said before Christmas," Mason said proudly. Hazel said next year. Liam said never because Dad is a chicken. Liam flushed. "I said he was cautious." "You bet on us?" Miles asked, half offended, half amused. "We bet on you," Hazel corrected. "On when you would stop being weird about it." Owen spoke quietly. "We saw you looking at each other." Lily climbed onto the couch and wedged herself between Grace and Miles, taking one of each of their hands. "Does this mean you will stay forever?" she asked. Her eyes were wide serious. Grace looked at Miles. He looked back. "If you want me to," Grace said. Lily frowned. "Oh, we wanted you to a long time ago." Hazel crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. "Just so you know," she said, aiming the words at Grace, "you are not Mom." "I know," Grace said. The words came easily. She had been holding them ready for a long time. "I could not be her if I tried. She was yours first." "You are Grace," Hazel said. Her chin wobbled. "That is different." "Is different bad?" Grace asked. Hazel swallowed. "It is different," she said again, "and it is good." Something in Grace's chest broke open in the gentlest way. Mason leaned against Miles's knee. "So, can we call you something?" he asked. "Like a nickname. Lily calls you Gracie sometimes, but she also calls the toaster Mr. Toast, so that does not count." Lily looked offended. "He likes it." "You can call me what you want," Grace said. Liam thought for a moment. "Grace is already short," he said. "We could just keep it." Lily shook her head. "You are ours now. You need a special name." Hazel rolled her eyes, but she was thinking too. "Nessa," she said suddenly, "from the middle." "Middle of what?" Mason asked. "Grace Vanessa," Hazel said. "That sounds right." "That is not my middle name," Grace said. "It is now," Hazel replied. Lily tested it on her tongue. "Nessa," she said. She grinned. "You are our Nessa." The others picked it up one by one. Nessa. The name settled on her shoulders like a soft new coat. It did not erase who she had been. It folded around it. Miles squeezed her hand. "We will figure it out," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "All of it. Together." She believed him. Not in the blind, desperate way she had once believed promises. This was different. This was rooted in the solid weight of his hand in hers and the sound of 5 children's voices, trying out a new name for someone they had already claimed. Summer slipped in quietly, then settled over Willow Harbor like a warm hand. By June, the garden along the fence had exploded. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vines, finely red, not green. The basil hazel had police so fiercely brushed Grace's fingers with its sharp scent every time she walked past. The kids spent more time outside than in skin turning brown at the edges, hair sun-streaked. Inside, the house changed in small ways. Grace's toothbrush sat in a cup by the bathroom sink beside Miles's razor. Her sweater found a permanent place on the back of a chair in the living room. A spare drawer in his dresser, once stuffed with mismatched socks and old receipts, held her folded shirts. At Harbor Books, Joan watched all of this from a distance. "You look less like someone waiting for the other shoe to drop," she said one afternoon, sliding a shipment invoice across the counter. "More like someone who owns a pair of shoes." Grace snorted. "What does that even mean?" "It means you are standing on your own feet," Joan said, "even if there is a man holding your hand while you do it." Grace thought about the joint bank account Miles had offered, and she had refused, about the paycheck she deposited herself every week, about the rent talks that had turned into murmured arguments until they compromised on a sum that made them both uncomfortable for different reasons. "We are figuring things out," she said. "Good," Joan replied. The day everything shifted started like any other. It was a Tuesday in late August. The air outside was hot enough to make the pavement shimmer. Inside the bookstore, the air conditioning hummed a steady white noise. Grace was at the back table sorting through a box of used books someone had brought in. She ran her thumb along spines, recognizing some titles, setting aside others for Joan to price. Moose snored at her feet, paws twitching in some dog dream. The television mounted in the corner was on muted, cycling through daytime news. No one usually paid attention to it. The sound stayed low, the captions flickering along the bottom of the screen. A cluster of customers near the front suddenly tilted their heads in the same direction, eyes drawn to the moving images. A woman in yoga pants stopped halfway to the register phone, forgotten in her hand. "Can you turn that up?" someone called. Joan clicked the remote. The volume rose, the anchor's voice cutting through the quiet. "Local philanthropist and businessman Daniel Reed is hosting a charity gala this weekend," she said. The image switched to a shot of a hotel ballroom tables, laid with white linens and tall glass centerpieces. The event will raise funds for survivors of domestic violence who have lost spouses to tragic accidents or illness. The screen showed a familiar profile, older but unmistakable, dark hair, a few more lines around the eyes, suit perfect tie, perfectly straight. "My wife died in a car accident 3 years ago," Daniel said, his voice warm, sympathetic. "I know how it feels to have your life torn apart. If I can use my resources to help others rebuild, that is the least I can do." The camera lingered on his face, on the carefully composed sorrow in his eyes. Grace stopped breathing. The book in her hand slid from her fingers and hit the table with a soft thud. Her vision narrowed until all she could see was the shape of his mouth, the way it curved at the corners when he wanted to look gentle. Her chest clamped. The room tilted. "Grace," Joan's voice came from far away. Grace pushed back from the table so quickly, her chair scraped the floor. Moose jerked awake, head snapping up. The edges of the shelves blurred as she made her way to the back room, one hand on the wall to keep herself upright. In the stockroom, the air was warm or stale. She leaned against a stack of boxes and slid down until she was sitting on the concrete knees, pulled up arms wrapped around them, forehead resting on denim. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, too fast, too shallow. He was alive. Of course he was alive. That was the point. But seeing him there on a screen in this small town that had felt so far away, talking about grief like he owned it, knocked the ground out from under her. Images hit her in flashes, his hand around her wrist, the way his face had changed when he was angry, the hospital room and Dr. Patel's face as she said, "He thinks you are dead. You can run." Her lungs cramped. She could not pull in enough air. The door creaked. Someone stepped in. The light from the shop cut a narrow strip across the floor. "Grace?" Joan's voice, calm, firm. "I cannot," Grace said. The words scraped. "I cannot breathe." "Yes, you can," Joan said. "You forgot how for a minute that is all. Look at me." Grace lifted her head. The room swam, then steadied. Joan crouched in front of her, not touching close enough that Grace could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. "Count with me," Joan said. "In for 4, out for 4. "I cannot," Grace repeated, but her body obeyed anyway. "In," Joan said. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Air moved. It felt like breathing through a straw, but it moved. "Good," Joan said. "Again." They did it until the buzzing in Grace's ears receded, and the vice around her chest loosened. Sweat cooled at the back of her neck where her hair clung. "My God," she whispered. "He is on television, talking about domestic violence." "I saw," Joan said. Her mouth was a thin line. "That man has a talent for performance." "It is not fair," Grace said. Her voice broke. "He did that to me. He killed our baby. He almost killed me. And now he gets to be the one helping people like me." Anger flickered under the panic, hot and electric. Joan let out a slow breath. "Fair is not part of this equation," she said, "but true can be." Grace let her head fall back against the boxes. The cardboard gave a soft crumple sound. "If I come forward," she said, "I am admitting we faked my death. There were papers, reports. Dr. Patel moved mountains. I signed things. He signed things. They think I am buried somewhere. If I say I am not, what happens to her, to me?" "Those are real questions," Joan said. She did not offer empty reassurance. "They have real answers. Some you might not like." Grace closed her eyes. Behind her lids she saw the porch light, Miles's hand on hers, Lily's braid swinging as she ran down the hall. "I am working my shift till 6, Joan said. "Then I am taking you home. You are not staying alone here with his face on my television." "I can walk," Grace protested out of reflex. "Probably," Joan said. "You are still not staying alone." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Grace stayed in the back room until the segment ended. She washed her face in the tiny bathroom sink, the cold water shocking. She went back out to the shop and rang up customers' recommended beach reads to a woman who hated the beach-made change with only one fumble. Her hands found the work. Her mind stayed somewhere between the sound of Daniel's voice and the feel of the floor under her when she could not breathe. At 6, Joan locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and turned off the television. "I will get my keys," she said. "Wait here." "No," Grace said. "I need to tell him. Miles. I need him to hear it from me, not from some screen at a neighbor's house." Joan studied her for a moment, then nodded. Then we go tell him. The drive to Maple Street took 7 minutes. Each stoplight felt longer than the last. Miles's minivan was already in the driveway when they pulled up. The porch light glowed even though the sky was still bright. Through the front window, Grace saw movement. Lily leaping from couch to rug, Hazel waving a piece of paper in Mason's face, Mrs. Alvarez on the armchair knitting needles moving. Her throat tightened. "Do you want me to come in?" Joan asked. Grace swallowed. "Yes," she said. They stepped out of the car. Gravel crunched under their shoes. The air smelled like cut grass and something sweet from a neighbor's grill. The door opened before they reached it. Miles stood there, face open, tie loose. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Relief first, then concern. "Hey," he said. "You are home later than usual. I was starting to think Moose finally kidnapped you." His smile faded as he took in her pale face and the way her hands hung rigid at her sides. "Grace," he asked, "what happened?" She felt Joan come to stand just behind her shoulder, a solid presence. "We need to talk," Grace said. Her voice was thin, but it held. He stepped back, already clearing space for them in the entry. "Kids, go finish your game in the back," he said. His tone told them this was not optional. "Mrs. A, can you give us a minute?" "Of course," Mrs. Alvarez said, already herding the children toward the den, murmuring something about snack time and extra cookies. When the living room was empty, Miles turned to Grace again. "Tell me," he said. She told him. About the news segment, about Daniel's face on the screen, about the words "survivors of domestic violence" coming out of his mouth like they belonged there. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. She did not leave anything out. Miles listened, jaw tight, jaw unclenching, only when she reached the part about not being able to breathe. Joan filled in the rest. The panic attack, the counting, the questions Grace had asked in the back room that she could not bring herself to repeat now. When they were done, the room was very quiet. Miles's hands opened and closed at his sides. "I am going to say something very unhelpful first," he said slowly. "I want to hit something." Joan snorted softly. "Join the club." He scrubbed a hand over his face, then lowered it. "Now I will say the part that matters," he said. "What do you want to do?" The question landed heavy. It was the same one he had asked on smaller days. About jobs. About staying. About sleeping with the door open or shut. This one was bigger. It still belonged to her. She sank onto the couch. The cushion dipped under her weight. Her fingers went automatically to the spoon at her neck. "I want him to stop," she said. "I want him to stop pretending. I want him to stop talking about people like me like we are something he can help. I want him to be seen for what he is." Her voice shook with anger now, not just fear. "But I am scared," she said. "If I come forward, they will say I lied. They will say I made a fool of the courts, that I tricked them." "They might," Joan said, "but they will also have to look at what he did." "Dr. Patel kept everything," Grace said. "She told me she did. Records, photos, notes. She said she would hold on to them in case I ever needed them." "Then she is our first call," Joan said. The old lawyer in her had returned, spine straight, her eyes sharp. "We will need a good attorney, someone who understands this kind of case, someone who can argue that the system failed you first, not the other way around." Miles dropped onto the coffee table in front of Grace, ignoring the way it complained under his weight. He took her hands in his grip firm but careful. "I cannot make this decision for you," he said. "If you choose to stay quiet, we will turn off the television and live our lives and keep you as far away from his orbit as we can. If you choose to speak, we will walk into that storm with you, all of us." She pictured the kids in the den. Lily's braid, Mason's missing front tooth, Hazel's fierce stare, Liam's watchful eyes, Owen's careful notebooks. "I do not want them anywhere near him," she said. "They will not be," Miles said, "not if I can help it." "You cannot keep them from hearing things," Joan said. Her voice was gentle but blunt. "Kids hear more than adults think." Grace nodded. "Then if they hear, I want them to hear the truth." The words surprised her. They came from somewhere deeper than the fear. She took a breath, in, out. The air moved. Her lungs remembered how. "Call Dr. Patel," she said. Miles's eyes glistened, but his smile was small and proud. "We will," he said. Joan stood. "I will start a list," she said. "Doctors, lawyers, anyone who can testify to what he did and what you were when you arrived here." Mrs. Alvarez appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "You need someone to testify about a scared woman on my couch 2 years ago," she said. "I have a good memory." Grace laughed, then a startled broken sound that still managed to carry something bright. She pressed her forehead to Miles's for a moment, closing her eyes. "I am still scared," she whispered. "Me too," he said, "but I am more scared of doing nothing." Her fingers tightened around his. Later that night, after Joan left and the children were in bed after the dishes were done, and the house had gone soft around the edges, Grace stepped out onto the porch. The air had cooled. Crickets chirped in the grass. The sky was clear stars pricked across it like tiny holes. The porch light glowed above her, steady and familiar. She wrapped her arms around herself and watched her breath curl into the night, then fade. Tomorrow there would be phone calls, questions, forms, probably more fear. Tonight she stood on the top step, bare feet on the worn wood, and let herself feel something else threaded through the terror. Resolve! The next morning started with the smell of coffee and the sound of Miles on the phone. Grace lay awake in the half-light, listening to his voice through the thin wall. Calm, measured. She could not hear every word, only pieces. "Thank you, doctor. Yes, we will come to you if that is easier." Her fingers found the spoon at her neck. Its familiar weight grounded her. Downstairs, the children moved through their usual routine, but the air felt different, thicker. Hazel watched the adults with narrowed eyes. Liam checked the news on his tablet, then set it face down without saying why. At 7:30, Joan arrived, hair pulled back tighter than usual, a leather notebook under her arm. "Mrs. A has the morning shift," she said briskly. "Kids to school, then cartoons. We have an appointment to make." They drove to Dr. Patel's clinic 40 minutes away. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and peppermint. Posters of smiling families lined the walls. Grace sat in a chair near the window, hands folded so tightly in her lap, her knuckles blanched. Dr. Patel came out to get them herself. She was smaller than Grace remembered, or maybe Grace was standing straighter now. Her dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples. Her eyes were the same, sharp and kind. "Grace," she said, "I was hoping I would not see you again like this." There was no surprise in her voice, only a weary understanding. They went into her office. The blinds were half closed against the glare. A single plant leaned toward the strip of light on the sill. Dr. Patel opened a locked cabinet and pulled out a thick folder, its tab marked with a name Grace had not used in a long time. The paper inside had yellowed slightly at the edges. Photographs were clipped to some of the pages. X-rays, typed reports, handwritten notes in a neat slanted script. "I kept everything," Dr. Patel said. "Every visit, every bruise you would not explain, every excuse you gave, and my own notes on what I believed was really happening." She turned a page. A younger Grace stared back from the photograph, one eye swollen, lips split. Miles inhaled sharply. "I am sorry you have to see these," Dr. Patel said to him. "I am not," he answered. His jaw was tight, but his voice was steady. "It is the truth." Dr. Patel nodded once. "Legally," she said, "you did lie to the court about your death. That is a fact. We will have to deal with that. But I also have a record here of a woman who begged me not to send her back into a house where she would die. I made a choice that day too. If anyone is going to ask questions, I would rather answer them alongside you than read your name in an actual obituary." Grace swallowed past the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she said. The words felt too small. Dr. Patel slid a card across the desk. "This is an attorney I trust," she said. "Her name is Carla Nguyen. She works with a legal clinic that specializes in domestic violence cases. She knows the system and she knows where it cracks." The next few weeks blurred into a series of appointments and retellings. They met Carla in a cramped office above a bakery that smelled like sugar and coffee. Carla was in her 40s, hair pulled into a bun that had partly escaped. She shook Grace's hand like she meant it. "We will not pretend this is simple," Carla said, tapping a pen against a legal pad. "He will say you are lying now. His lawyers will say you are trying to ruin him. The district attorney will have questions about the original death certificate, but you have something he does not." "Records," Grace said. "Records," Carla agreed. "And people, doctors, neighbors, employers, anyone who saw you before and after. We do not paint you as perfect. We paint you as real. That tends to scare men like him." Joan sat in the corner listening, jotting down anything Carla did not. At home, life went on around the gathering storm. Grace still worked at Harbor Books. She still made dinner most nights. She still sat on the porch step sometimes in the evenings, breathing in the smell of cut grass and grill smoke, feeling the familiar smoothness of the spoon pendant under her thumb. But there were new things now. Late-night calls with Carla. Afternoons when she drove out of town to sit in interviews with investigators who recorded everything she said. She told the story so many times she felt like she was reading from a script. yet each telling peeled something raw inside her. The children noticed. One afternoon, Grace waited outside the elementary school. As the last bell rang, the line of kids spilling onto the sidewalk. Liam came out first, backpack slung over one shoulder. His face was tight. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded once, then shook his head. "Some kids said things," he said. Hazel joined them, eyes flashing. "There was a segment on the news," she said. "They saw it. Other parents are talking. They said you lied about dying, that you are a criminal." The word hung between them, ugly and too big for the space. Grace's stomach dropped. "I am so sorry," she said. "You did not hit him," Mason said, appearing on her other side. "He hit you." Lily squeezed her hand. "Are you going to jail?" she whispered. "No," Grace said reflexively. Then she caught herself. She would not lie, not to them. "We are trying to make sure that does not happen," she said instead. "We are talking to people who know the law, Dr. Patel and a lawyer. They are going to help explain why I had to do what I did." "Why did you have to?" Owen asked. His eyes were steady, searching. Grace crouched so she was at their level, the afternoon sun hot on the back of her neck. "When I left him," she said, "it was because I believed if I stayed he would kill me. I asked for help. Dr. Patel gave it. We used the tools we had to try to get away from someone who was very good at pretending to be kind." She looked at each of them in turn. "If there were a better way, I would have taken it," she said. "If telling the truth then would have kept me safe, I would have done that. We are trying to fix what the system got wrong in the first place." Liam's mouth tightened. "My teacher said sometimes the law has to catch up," he said. "Maybe this is one of those times." Hazel set her chin. "We will tell people you are not a criminal," she said. "You are Nessa." "People will say what they want," Grace said softly. "You do not have to fight everyone for me." "We are not fighting for you," Mason said. "We are fighting with you." Lily wrapped both arms around Grace's neck. "You borrowed our brave," she said. "Remember, you can keep it longer." Grace held her eyes stinging. The day of the preliminary hearing came in early fall. The courthouse in the city was bigger than any building in Willow Harbor, its stone facade looming. The steps leading up to it felt too wide. Cameras clustered near the entrance cables, snaking across the ground, reporters in neat coats, speaking into microphones. Grace stood on the sidewalk with Miles on one side, Carla on the other. Joan and Dr. Patel were just behind them. The air smelled like exhaust and old rain. Her heart pounded hard enough to echo in her ears. "You ready?" Carla asked. "No," Grace said. "But I am going in." "Good enough," Carla replied. They climbed the steps. Flash bulbs popped. A reporter shoved a microphone toward Grace's face. "Grace Reed," he said. "Is that your name? Why did you fake your death?" Carla stepped between them, hand up. "No questions right now," she said. "You will hear our side in court." Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. The security checkpoint beeped. Grace emptied her pockets into a plastic tray, walking through the metal detector as if in a dream. The courtroom was smaller than she had imagined. Wooden benches, a rail, a judge's bench raised above the rest, empty for now. On the other side of the room, at a table near the front, sat Daniel. He wore a dark suit tie, perfectly knotted. His hair had a tasteful touch of gray at the temples. He looked good. He always had. When his gaze landed on her, his eyes widened, just for a second. Shock, then something else. Calculation. He turned to his attorney, said something with a small, controlled gesture. His mouth curved into a pleasant expression when he faced the room again, as if this were all a minor inconvenience. Grace's stomach clenched. Her hands began to tremble. Miles took the seat beside her on their side of the rail. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. The warmth of his skin cut through the cold in her chest. "Breathe," he murmured. She did. The judge entered. Everyone rose, then sat. The sound of the gavel cracked through the air. The proceedings that day were about logistics, motions, scheduling. Daniel's lawyer argued that the case was a waste of resources, that dredging up old accusations from a woman who had already lied under oath was irresponsible. Carla countered with a stack of documents. Medical records, photographs, reports from Dr. Patel, early statements from neighbors who had heard shouting from coworkers who had seen bruises from Joan and Mrs. Alvarez, and others who had known Grace since she arrived in Willow Harbor. "This is not a case about a simple lie," Carla said at one point. "This is a case about a pattern of violence the system failed to address and the extreme measures a victim felt she had to take to survive. That deserves to be heard." The judge agreed to move forward. Months passed in a slow, grinding rhythm of preparation. Statements were taken, depositions scheduled. Daniel's team tried to paint Grace as unstable, vindictive attention-seeking. Carla and her colleagues countered with the tangible weight of evidence. The trial itself began on a cold day in winter, almost 3 years after Grace had first sat on a bus bench in Willow Harbor. In the front row of the gallery behind the rail sat a small cluster of familiar faces. Joan in her moss-colored sweater, Dr. Patel posture straight, Mrs. Alvarez hands folded around a rosary she rolled between her fingers. At the end of the row, barely tall enough for their heads to clear the back of the bench, were 5 children. The judge had ruled they were too young to be in the courtroom for the more graphic testimony. They spent the hardest parts in a waiting room down the hall, supervised by Mrs. Alvarez and a volunteer counselor. But they insisted on being there when they could, to see her walk in and out by choice. On the stand under the oath, Grace told her story again. This time, it was not in a softly lit office or a kitchen late at night. It was under the bright, unforgiving lights of a courtroom with a judge watching and a jury taking notes. She spoke about the first year of marriage, the isolation, the slow erosion of her world, the first time he hit her, and every time after. She described the party, the drive, the night on the floor, the hospital room, the decision that had felt like the only one left. Her voice shook sometimes, but it did not break. Each breath came with effort, but it came. Daniel's lawyer tried to catch her in contradictions, to twist her words back on her. "You lied then?" he said, pacing in front of the witness stand. "Why should the court believe you now?" Grace met his gaze, then the jury's. "I lied to stay alive," she said. "I am telling the truth now for the same reason." Dr. Patel testified, her notes backing up Grace's account. She described the injuries she had seen, the excuses that never quite fit, the fear in Grace's eyes. "I made a choice," Dr. Patel said. "Knowing it might someday lead to a courtroom like this or a cemetery, I prefer the courtroom." Joan spoke about the woman who had walked into her bookstore with empty hands and a haunted look, and the one who had grown behind the counter over the years. She did not ask for anything free, Joan said. She wanted a job, not pity. Mrs. Alvarez described the first night she had seen Grace in Miles's living room, the shadows under her eyes, the way she had flinched when someone dropped a spoon. She looked like a person who had been running a long time, she said. Each testimony laid another stone in the path between the girl who had once believed she deserved the pain and the woman who sat at the defense table, now upright, fingers wrapped around a pen so she would not clench them into fists. The jury saw the photos. They read the reports. They heard the recordings of Daniel's interviews, the careful way he answered questions, the small inconsistencies Carla pointed out. On the last day after closing arguments, Grace sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Miles. The children were with Mrs. Alvarez at the far end of the corridor, playing a quiet card game on the floor. "You did it," Miles said. "It is not over yet," she replied. "I know," he said, "but whatever they decide, you told the truth. You stood up." She leaned her head against the wall. The paint was cool against her skull. "I am tired," she said. "I know," he answered. The bailiff opened the door. "Jury has reached a verdict," he said. The courtroom was still when they filed back in. The judge took her seat. The foreperson stood, a folded paper in hand. "In the case of the state versus Daniel Reed," the judge said, "on the charge of aggravated assault, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty," the foreperson replied. The word rang in Grace's ears. They read count after count: domestic battery, coercive control, evidence tampering. On each one the answer was the same: guilty. Daniel sat very still at his table. His jaw flexed once. His attorney leaned in, whispering something. He did not look at Grace. Her hands shook. Her breath came in a rush. For a moment she thought she might cry or laugh, or both. Miles's hand found her back steady between her shoulder blades. She exhaled slowly. Outside on the courthouse steps, cameras flashed again. Voices called her name, shouted questions. She did not stop for them. At the bottom of the stairs, 5 small bodies barreled into her. Lily hid her first, arms going tight around her waist. Mason wrapped around one leg. Owen and Hazel pressed in from either side, Liam a solid presence at her back. "You did it," Mason said, his words muffled in her coat. "He cannot hurt you anymore," Owen said. "Can we go home now?" Lily asked. Grace let out a breath that felt cleaner than any she had taken in years. "Yes," she said, "we can go home." 6 months later, the garden looked different. The tomato vines were gone, pulled up after their last tired fruit. The basil had bolted and been replaced with late-blooming flowers. Strings of lights hung from the fence to the trees, casting soft pools of gold over the grass. Chairs borrowed from neighbors sat in rows facing a simple wooden arch that Miles and the kids had built. Grace had helped wrap it with ivy and white ribbon that morning, her fingers nimble, her stomach light in a way that made it hard to stand still. Now, as the sun slid down toward the trees and the air cooled, she stood in the doorway of the house and watched people fill the yard. Joan arrived first in a dress the color of moss, same as her favorite sweater. She carried a small wrapped box and a look on her face that was half pride, half something softer. Mrs. Alvarez came with a casserole, even though Grace had told her not to cook, muttering about how weddings needed real food. Dr. Patel walked in beside her, hair pinned up a rare evening off from the clinic. Carla appeared in a navy suit tie, loosened her usual stack of files replaced by a camera. A few of Miles's co-workers mingled near the folding table that held iced tea and lemonade. The receptionist from his office waved when she saw Grace's eyes crinkling. The yard hummed with low conversation and the rustle of fabric. Upstairs in the small bedroom that had once been a guest room and now held more of her life than she had thought possible, Grace stood in front of the mirror. Her dress was simple, knee-length white cotton that moved when she did. Lily had insisted on flowers in her hair, so Hazel had braided small sprigs of baby's breath into the loose twist at the back of her head. "You look like a fairy," Lily had said, solemn and awed. Now, alone for a moment, Grace looked at her reflection and saw something she had not seen in a very long time. She saw herself. Not the girl from the old photos in Dr. Patel's folder, not the shadowed woman on the bench, not even just the caretaker the kids had first known. She saw all of them at once. Survivor, partner, Nessa. A soft knock came at the door. "You ready?" Miles called. His voice held a smile. She opened the door. He stood in the hall in a dark suit that fit better than the one he had worn to court. His tie was straight for once. There was a small line between his brows, nervousness, not doubt. "You clean up well," she said. "So do you," he replied. They looked at each other for a moment, taking in the sight. "Last chance to run," he said quietly. "Instant family of 7. Chaos, noise, very little hot water on school mornings." "I have seen your laundry room," she answered. "I know what I am getting into." His mouth curved. The line between his brows eased. "Okay," he said. They walked down the stairs together. In the yard, the kids lined up near the back door like a mismatched parade. Liam wore a small suit that made him look older than 9. His hair had been tamed with water and effort. He held a small velvet box in his hand as if it contained state secrets. Mason fidgeted in his own jacket, tugging at the collar. Owen smoothed the front of his shirt for the 3rd time, fingers tracing the buttons as if counting them. Hazel and Lily stood side by side in pale dress and flower baskets looped over their arms. Hazel's braid lay over one shoulder, Lily's hair in soft curls that Grace had brushed herself. "You look pretty," Mason said to Grace. "Like fancy pretty, not just regular pretty." "Thank you," she said. Her cheeks warmed. "You are ready?" Liam asked Miles. "I think so," Miles said. Joan walked to the front of the small gathering and stood under the arch. She had agreed to officiate as soon as Miles had asked her lawyer's voice more than capable of carrying over a backyard. "All right," she said. "If everyone could find a seat, we will get this show on the road before the mosquitoes discover us." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Chairs scraped. The children took their positions. The music was a simple playlist on a speaker songs the kids had argued over for weeks until they found ones they could all tolerate. Something light drifted out into the evening. Hazel and Lily walked down the makeshift aisle, first scattering petals with varying degrees of accuracy. Lily threw handfuls that landed in clumps. Hazel placed hers with precision, pretending not to enjoy the way everyone watched her. Owen followed carrying a small book. Not a Bible, though he had asked about that. It was a worn copy of a story Emily had read to them as toddlers. He held it with care. Mason walked beside Liam, whispering something that made Liam roll his eyes and try not to smile. The velvet box looked very small in Liam's hand. Then it was just Grace and Miles. They stepped forward together. Faces blurred at the edges of Grace's vision. She saw flashes. Mrs. Alvarez dabbing at her eyes. Dr. Patel with her lips pressed together as if holding in words. Carla with her camera up, capturing each moment. The receptionist from the office pointing out tiny details to the coworker beside her. Mostly, though, she saw the path ahead lined with the petals the girls had dropped leading to the arch and to Joan and to the 5 children who had changed everything. They reached the front and turned to face each other. Joan smiled at them, then at the guests. "We are not in a courtroom today," she said, "so I will keep this brief." Soft chuckles floated across the yard. "I am not here as a judge or as a lawyer," she went on. "I am here as someone who has watched 2 people build something slow and careful and strong." She nodded toward the kids. "And as someone who has watched these 5 supervise the process." Hazel smirked. Mason gave a small wave, then seemed to remember he was supposed to be solemn, and dropped his hand. Miles and Grace have written their own vows, Joan said, which is either very brave or very foolish. We will decide after we hear them. Miles cleared his throat. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, then thought better of it and handed it to Liam. He looked at Grace instead. When I first saw you, he said, you were sitting on a bus bench in a dress meant for warmer weather, and I thought, here is someone with worse judgment than me. A ripple of laughter moved through the chairs. I thought maybe I could help you, he continued. Take you to a diner, offer you a couch, give myself the illusion that I was doing something good. His voice softened. I did not know you were going to walk into my house and quietly hold the broken parts of our lives together, he said. I did not know you were going to teach my kids that grief is not something to be afraid of, that love is not something that disappears when someone dies. He swallowed. You have seen me at my worst, he said. Burnt toast, lost tempers, falling asleep halfway through bedtime stories. You stayed. You walked into a courtroom when you could have stayed hidden. You chose the hard way, and you let us stand beside you while you did it. He took a breath. I cannot promise things will always be easy, he said. The kids will slam doors. I will forget my lunch. The garden will die every winter. But I can promise I will show up. I will listen. I will hold the light when it gets dark. He smiled, eyes wet. I love you, he finished. I choose you, every day. Grace's throat was already tight. The words she had written felt too small now, but she spoke them anyway. When I first saw you, she said, you were standing in a parking lot in a coat that did not look warm enough, trying to decide whether to leave me where I was. Miles huffed a small laugh. You stopped, she said. You gave me coffee. You gave me a room with a lock on the inside. You did not ask for explanations I could not give. You just kept showing up. She glanced at the children at their faces turned toward her open and intent. You let me make burnt pasta and braid hair and mess up the laundry, she said. You let me love your kids before I knew how to say I loved you. You never asked me to forget who I had been, but you made room for who I could become. Her fingers trembled in his. I used to think that love was something that had to be earned, she said, that it came with conditions and rules and fear. You taught me that love can be steady, that it can sit on a couch with you at the end of a long day and just be there. She drew in a breath that felt full, not tight. I cannot promise I will not be scared sometimes, she said, that old echoes will not sneak in, but I can promise I will tell you when they do. I will not walk away from the hard parts. I will stand with you in them. She smiled through the blur in her eyes. I love you, she said. I choose you every day. Joan nodded, satisfied. All right, she said. Rings. Liam and Mason stepped forward. Liam opened the velvet box with exaggerated care, revealing 2 simple bands. They glinted in the fading light. Do not drop them, Mason whispered, not quite quietly enough. I am not you, Liam whispered back. There was a small flurry of laughter. Grace slid the ring onto Miles's finger, her hand steady now. Miles slid the other onto hers, his thumb brushing her knuckle as he did. By the power vested in me by the state and by mutual stubbornness, Joan said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. That is not the official wording, Carla murmured, amused. It should be, Joan replied. You may kiss, she added louder. They did. It was not the first time. It would not be the last. It was different in front of all these eyes, with applause rising around them and Lily's delighted squeal punctuating the moment. It still felt somehow like theirs. When they pulled apart, Mason let out a theatrical groan. Gross, he said, grinning. Hazel rolled her eyes. You will live, she told him. People came forward to hug them. Mrs. Alvarez pressed Grace's face between her hands and kissed her cheeks. Dr. Patel hugged her with one arm, eyes bright. You are very inconvenient, the doctor said into her hair. I have to keep track of you now. Thank you, Grace whispered. You are welcome, Dr. Patel replied. Carla shook Miles's hand, then Grace's camera dangling from her wrist. Remind me the next time I think my job is only about paperwork, she said. The reception was simple, plates balanced on laps, kids running between chairs, lemonade sloshing near the brim of cups. Someone put music back on. Mrs. Alvarez started a line dance that half the yard joined and half watched with amusement. As the sky darkened, the string lights above the yard took over. Fireflies blinked in the grass at the edges. The air cooled, carrying the faint, clean smell of the lake. After cake had been cut and eaten, after Lily had fallen asleep with her head in Joan's lap, After Mason and Owen had tired themselves out in some game that involved more rules than anyone else could follow, Grace slipped away to the edge of the yard. She found Miles near the arch watching the kids. "They are going to be impossible tomorrow," he said softly. "Sugar hangovers. We will feed them eggs and send them outside," she said. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For saying yes," he said. "For choosing us. For walking into that diner. For surviving long enough to get mad." She turned her head against his shoulder. "You stopped," she said. "You saw me on that bench and you stopped. You turned on the porch light and left it on." He looked toward the house. The light over the front door glowed a small, steady beacon. "I think that one is yours now," he said. They stood there for a while, watching Lily sleep. Watching Hazel try to teach Liam a slow dance. Watching Owen fold napkins into shapes on the picnic table. Watching Mason and Mrs. Alvarez argue over the rules of a card game. Eventually, the guests drifted away. Joan carried Lily inside. Miles took down the empty cups. Grace stacked plates. The yard slowly returned to itself, only the arch and the lights remaining. Later, when the kids were finally in bed and the last dish was in the sink, they stepped out onto the porch. The night was cool, stars scattered across the sky. In the distance, Willow Lake reflected a rim of light from the houses along its shore. The water moved in slow, dark ripples. Grace sat on the top step. Miles settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She inhaled, tasting the dampness in the air, the faint remnants of grilled food, the sweetness of cut grass. Her breath rose visible for a moment in the chill, then disappeared. He matched his breathing to hers without thinking. In, out, the rhythm was easy. She rested her head against him, hand finding his. For a long time, she simply sat there, listening to the small sounds of the house behind them. A pipe ticking, a floorboard creaking as someone rolled over in sleep, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of water at the edge of the town. She had lived with the sound of her own breath as a task for years, as something she had to manage and count and control. Now, in the warm circle of the porch light, with his fingers woven through hers and 5 sleeping children inside, it felt like something else entirely. It felt simple. She breathed in. She breathed out. For the first time, it did not feel like work. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.